Sure.
Not that anybody tracks that sort of thing. So.
No. Good. All right, everyone, good evening. I've got about 2 minutes after the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and call to order our regular session of October 24, 2017. First item that we have on the agenda this evening, we have the opening prayer and the pledges of allegiance to the flags of the United States and the state of Texas. Councilmember Thompson will lead us in those. If you'll join me in standing, please.
Sometimes when we look at the headlines, it's easy to focus on what is around us and what is happening internationally and nationally. In light of that, I'd like to read the lyrics of a song which could easily be a modern-day prayer, "You Are God Alone," by Philip, Craig, and Dean, addressing who our God is. Let this be a prayer. You are not a God created by human hands. You are not a God dependent on any mortal man. You are not a God in need of anything we can give. By your plan, that's just the way it is. You are God alone from before time began. You were on your throne. You are God alone, and right now, in the good times and bad, you are on your throne, and you are God alone. You're the only God whose power none can contend. You're the only God whose name and praise will never end. You're the only God who's worthy of everything we can give. You are God, and that's just the way it is. Father, in a world of uncertainty, where we never know what may be happening from one day to the next, help us to be reminded of the constant factor in our life, and that is you. And may that constant factor give us hope, strengthen us, look to you for wisdom and humility. In your Son's name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor to the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I have two items of recognition and presentation this evening, but before I get to those, I'd like to recognize some folks that are here. So first of all, from Troop 51, Ethan, and is it DuPault? Is that correct? Do we pronounce the T? DuPault? Welcome. Glad to have you with us, working on your citizenship and community badge. So glad to have you with us this evening. Thanks for joining us. Also have two of our trustees from our Samuel. See, I'm gonna careful. I was actually at the 50th reunion of the 1967 class of Schertz High School, and so I've got the changeover in my head at the moment. So no, from our Schertz Universal City Independent School District, we have trustee Mr. Robert Westbrook and trustee Mr. Gary Inman. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Appreciate it, guys. right, a couple of things, and the first one being the introduction of the student mayors and student council members for the day. And Ms. Brenda, did you want to talk a little bit about the program? Did you want to kick us off and say a little bit about what we do here, or do you want me to do that? Sounds great.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, citizens of Schertz, executive staff. Again, we have kicked off this year our first quarter of our Student Mayor Student Council for the Day program. This is a great program. We get the kids in here. We talk to them about our roles. You council get to talk to your roles. What we do is try to switch you guys out. We have the team. We asked the team, and this time Cecilia Palomo with the engineering department came and gave a presentation. We put the children up, the students up like you guys are. We had they had to make a decision. They had a presentation, they had to make a decision. There was some good deliberations back and forth. We had Mayor Pro Tem, myself, Gutierrez, Officer Lafif come up here, citizens to be heard. So they got to see how that is interacted. I'm excited. Again, we got this program. I thank the school district for this. I thank the council for this. So I'm kicking it off saying, wow, this is amazing. Each group of students just amaze me. These young ladies and men, this is the leaders of the future right there.
Very good.
So, I think, Mayor, I think they might have something to say. I'll let you kick it off now.
Certainly. I had a chance to visit with all four of these young people today, and insightful questions. Certainly questions that I would not have thought to ask when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. I was still going out of the house with my mom saying, oh, that doesn't match. Come back and change clothes. It was exceptional. It really was. It was really inspiring to watch. So with that, I think each of them has written something down from their experience today, and I'd ask if they would like to please read that to us and share what you saw or learned or had go on today. So we'll go in any order that you like. Have you decided on an order, or would you like me to set one? I'll set one. Why don't we start on the end, and we'll work our way back this way toward the dais. So if you would, introduce yourself first, say your name and the school that you attend, and then share what you've written down.
My name is Delando Johnson, and I learned today that the fire department and the police department and the council, they do a lot for us in this district. And being here was a great insight on what they do, and it was a really good experience. I hope other kids get to do that.
Excellent. Very nicely said.
Hello, my name is Bailey Toda. I'm an 8th grader from Corbett Junior High, and I believe that one of the most significant things that I've learned today is that in life you can never please everybody. The people of a community are tightly bound together by their differences in the same way that they drive us together. May the people in this room tonight recognize different needs of those around you, and may we as people recognize that those in power are just like you, only people. Thank you to my teacher, Ms. Mosey Gemba, and my parents for this wonderful opportunity in driving me forward. Thank you and good evening.
Very well said.
Hey, I'm Michaela Martinez. I am from Dobie Junior High. I'm an 8th grader. And first off, I would like to thank everyone that made this possible for all of us, meaning our parents, our teachers, and of course, EMS, the fire department, the police department, and council members. Without you, it wouldn't be possible. So I learned today that to make a change, you have to work together. The fire department, the police department, and the EMS and council members, without them, our city wouldn't be growing, or it wouldn't flourish as it is right now. And without any of them, it wouldn't be possible. We wouldn't be safe. we probably wouldn't have a lot of control in our city, and everything would go all over the place. They make our town very safe, and they also think about the people and their happiness. So without them, all those food places that you think about today, they wouldn't be here. And I know food's a good thing right there, because, And I would just like to thank everyone again, because I'd like to thank Dobie for giving me this chance, and thank you for thinking I'm an outstanding citizen, because that means a lot to me. And peace.
It's well said.
Hi, my name is Madison DiDomenico. I am a 7th grader at Corbett Junior High. I first want to say thank you for everyone giving us a chance to come out here and experience this day. The most significant thing that I have learned was how hard it was to discuss with the other students about problems that have happened or that could happen. I was amazed to see what the mayor and the council men and women have to go through each day. Thank you.
Very well. Gotta remind me to put it back, though. I always forget.
Whoops. Let's get Madison up here.
Why don't you all four
Yeah, come on.
come up here, if you would, just for a moment. Got a little something for you to remember your day with us today.
Here's Madison's.
So as part of this tradition, we not only send you away with your memory of what you did here today, but something perhaps a little tangible as well. So first and foremost, Madison, and we'll have to step up here because photographs are required. And yes, they did remind me to put this back down. Appreciate it. All right, next up this evening we have both introduction of the program and recognition regarding the fire prevention poster contest. And Chief Long.
Hey, evening, Mayor and Council. We're excited to be here tonight and show you some awesome posters that we had this year for our poster contest. As you know, Fire Prevention Week is October 8th through the 14th, but we enjoy it so much, we like to stretch it out for the whole month. So we call it Fire Prevention Month. Some of the students will still be seeing us come around to the schools in the area. And so we just wanted to take this time to recognize, we had 120 posters entered in our poster contest this year. Last Friday is when the voting took place. We had some city employees participate this year, as well as some council members and mayor and city manager that participated this year in the judging. So we had a good time with that. It took up the entire gym. And we just wanted to start out with the winners from kindergarten to second grade as the first category. And so here are the top 3 posters in this category. And so starting out from Sipple Elementary, third place is going to go to Philip Lee. And here's the poster. Philip's not here. We're going to take that out to Sipple for him. And moving on to second place, if Charlotte can come on up. Here's our second place poster. Charlotte's from Schertz Elementary. And first place goes to Coralie Davis from Pasco Elementary. And here's a copy of her poster. All right, next we had, the next division was third and fourth grade. And so here are the top 3 from third and fourth grade. In third place, coming up next is Sabrina De Leon from Schertz Elementary. Here. Next, from Rose Garden Elementary is Dayton Boney, second place. First place in the third and fourth grade from Wiederstein goes to Joshua Chavez. And next we had 5th and 6th grade. And here were the 3 posters for 5th and 6th grade. And our third place, who I don't believe is here, from Slaughter Elementary, Laura Hunter. And then here was that one. Second place, right here, goes to Christopher Alapeg from Wilder. First place goes to Julian Treadle from Slaughter, and here's that picture. Then we had one last special presentation where the mayor got to pick out his favorite poster from all of them.
One of the fun things about this particular opportunity that they give me is I get to look at all posters from whatever grade level and pick one that reaches out and grabs me the most. And, well, this year it's Coralie Davis. Where are you?
Coralie Davis.
Davis?
Coralie?
Coralie? this is also for you. So you're going to have those two to take home. So congratulations.
Good job.
You're going to turn around that way.
Yeah.
There you go. Hold on. Here. Congratulations to all the winners. Very well done.
So I just wanted to finish up by saying thanks to all of our schools in the area and all the school district employees helped us get the word out. They helped us collect the posters we went by. They made it very easy on us. We had a couple of Dr. Gibson come by and participated in the judging as well. And so we just had a great time with the school going out. They made it extremely easy on us, and so we just wanted to tell the school district thank you for all the help they provided us on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it very much. So one last comment before we move on. I also want to recognize all the parents that have helped the kids do these things, to be involved, to join us as they did today when the four sat up here to participate in the poster contest. It doesn't happen without you all, and thank you and congratulations to all of your children. Well done. Well done. So I'm guessing, however, that there may be homework, there may be dinner and such. So if you guys don't want to hang out for the rest of the meeting, it's quite all right. I'm going to go ahead and call for a 5-minute recess, and everybody would like to go ahead and head home and take care of those things and go ahead and do so. So we stand at recess for about 5 minutes. All right, it hasn't quite been 5 minutes, but I think everybody that wanted to clear out and take photos has had an opportunity to do so. So I'll go ahead and bring us back into open session at this time, and we'll continue. Next item on the agenda this evening, we have announcements of upcoming city events. Who has that one this evening? Mr. Waite.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. This Thursday, October 26th at 6:30, we have the Simonson Volunteer Appreciation Banquet here in the Schertz Civic Center. This weekend is the Skylight Balloon Festival at the River City Community Church grounds, or others may know that as the old Verizon Amphitheater, out off Lookout Road in Selma. Also on Saturday here in Schertz, we have a large event, our Trunk or Treat, and this year we combined it with a movie in the park. The Trunk or Treat starts Saturday the 28th at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. There'll be trunk or treating, costume contest, spooky hayride, a pumpkin patch photo opportunity, a Halloween hay maze. Don't get lost in there. We'll have to send the fire department in to find you. Hotel Transylvania 2 is the movie that's being shown. The movie will begin at 9. The trunk or treat will run from 5 o'clock until close to that time. And then Friday, November 3rd, the weekend after Halloween, we have the Hal Baldwin Golf Tournament at Olympia Hills Golf Club. On that Friday, the check-in starts at 8 o'clock. There's a shotgun start at 10 a.m. that morning for that golf tournament. And then Sunday, November 5th, just a friendly reminder, is the start of daylight savings time, so the clocks roll back at 2 a.m. that Sunday morning. Thursday the 9th is our Star Party at Crescent Bend Nature Park. It starts at 5:30 p.m. in the evening. Welcome everybody to come out. They'll have all types of things set up to view the stars as the sun goes down, and a number of things that will be visible that night. City offices will be closed on Friday, November 10th, the very next day, in observance of Veterans Day. And then Tuesday, November 14th, is our next city council meeting, and that starts 6 p.m. here in the council chambers. Next one is on the 14th because of the election on the 7th. And speaking of that, early voting has begun. It will continue through Friday, November 3rd, and then on Tuesday, November 7th is Election Day with voting from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Next item on the agenda this evening are announcements and recognitions by the city manager, Mr. Kessel. Mr. Kessel?
Mayor, Council, I'm going to recognize 3 individuals and departments by doing a project update on some projects they're working on. I think you'll find it very informative. One is a report from Lauren Trum over in the Parks Department about the Veterans Plaza. They've redone the small trail that, if you recall, seemed to go to nowhere. It's been rerouted so that it has a little bit more of a purpose. They've reseeded the open area and trying to get grass to grow back in there. And they've solved the question about the bricks. They're going to have those ordered and do this installation in-house. Jared, the new employee they have in Parks, feels confident that he can get those bricks laid correctly. That, if you recall, was one of the issues. Schertz Parkway, I've got a report from Scott McClelland and also John Nowak. We get these weekly reports now on that project. Some of the details, and there is an item tonight, so I'm not going to talk at all about that particular agenda item, but they've got the excavation all done on the lane that goes towards FM 78, and you've all seen that. They've got the sub-base put in. They've got the concrete rebar started at the top of the hill and are working their way down. They did some minor pour on the concrete this afternoon around 2 o'clock on Maskey Road, and so they're making good progress. And obviously there's an agenda item on that one as well. And then the third item has to do with Fire Station number 3 in Cade Long, and the fire department had been working on that. The property has 2 big components. One is we have the land to purchase at legal and in purchasing for final review. My understanding is that it will be ready this week for my signing, and Dan just nodded yes, so that's good. And then we also hit a milestone with a revised GMP estimate that actually hits our budgeted number. So we feel confident in actually signing that document because we're now close enough on price and scope that we feel we can get there correctly. And so I've got some more information. Probably within 60 days or less, you'll have an action item at the City Council for that guaranteed maximum price. and you'll see us moving forward on that particular project.
All right, very good. Thank you, sir. Next item that we have on the agenda this evening is hearing of residents, and signed up this evening is Diana Taylor. Ms. Taylor, please. Evening.
Good evening to the mayor, city councilman, and each and one of you that's here. I'm going to make it brief and short tonight. I have a few concerns about what's going on in Fairhaven. We have a lot of break-ins out there. We don't have enough cops. And I noticed on the agenda, on item number 10 that we have in front of us, we need more cars. We need more cops. We do not have enough cops in Fairhaven or the city of Schertz to take care of us. We have a lot of things that is happening, and if you get your report, we just had an incident just a week ago that someone backed into someone's vehicle on Storm King, but we don't have any cops to come out and take care of it. We have had several break-ins into cars, and now they're starting to take houses. They're taking things out of people's yards. These things are happening late at night. The speed is ridiculous on our street. We need bumps. We prayed for them. We've asked for them. We need help from you all. And I'm begging you all to come out and help us. And to the team of Brian, I'm thanking you all for coming out to start on the sidewalks. I'm waiting for you to get back with me with Pulte, because we do have issues out there. Pulte is still lifting homes. How long is this going to take? We need help out there. We need you all to come out there to see what's going on with these people. We're losing lives out there because of stress. When I mean lives, I mean deceased. People are tired. We need your help. So I'm begging you all to come out there to help us. A couple more things. I'm going to do my 2 minutes. I would like to also thank a couple of people on this board up here that have been with us from the time that I've been here. I've been in this place here almost 9 years, and I'm very disappointed in a lot of things that I have seen. As a citizen of Schertz, I voted for you all, and I expected as a citizen that you all come back and take care of us, and let's not use it as a personal item to take care of yourself. I'm very disappointed because I know he's no longer with us. Mayor Baldwin left a legacy here, and I hoped that you all don't let it down. He fought for us, for our homes. What are you all going to do to help us to continue to improve Schertz? The highways, the grass are very tall. Is this the way we're supposed to treat our citizen? The city of Schertz? We pay our taxes. Where is our money going? I would like to have answers from you all to help us, because we have some issues. We've had the sergeant came to my house from the police department here at Schertz. I said that he can park in front of my house to catch the speeders. It is very hard for one person. He cannot spread himself thin. I won't use the name. But again, we have a problem. I know we have a chief that's involved here. It's over the police department. Chief Taylor, I call my brother's no longer with us, but I can say he was out there to take care of us. We got problems. What do you all want, someone to get killed out there before you do something? Kids are catching the bus at 6:50 a.m. in the dark, and cars are speeding. I could tell you all the cars are speeding. We've called. They can't just rush to us all the time. There's other things happening between Fairhaven and Northcliffe. So I'm asking you all to take care of that as well. And also, if you don't mind, we need some type of sign up as you get off the exit to come to 1103. We know there's construction because we can see it, but the construction is hindering a lot of people from passing, and we want it done, but you need something up because we have people going to work on 1103, and the traffic is just back all the way back, I guess, to Cibolo. That's how bad it is every morning. I see it myself. And I want to also say this from my heart. This has been on my heart and my chest very heavy. I do not believe in having the city of Schertz to be divided. Right now, we're dividing ourselves. We don't need that. Schertz is not that big that we cannot work together. So whatever you do, I hope that you be careful what you put out there on Facebook. When you put something on Facebook, I know the light is on green, it bites you. Be careful, because you're supposed to be a leader in a government position, and you're doing the things like this to represent the city. That's what we're about, dividing the city. I pray for you all to get it together. I want to say this in my closing statement. Mr. Edwards, Ms. Kaiser, Mr. Crawford, I want to say thank you for your professionalism, your dedication, and your concern about the citizen of Schertz. Without you helping and being involved, it would not have happened. Many of you on that board do not know what happened, but I can identify those names. I know I cannot call you individuals, but I did. City Manager, Mr. Kessel, I want to thank you for sending your team out there to care about the city of Schertz. We have a lot of things going on. It's very heartbreaking. So I'm asking you all to get new policemen. Don't buy cars. Put cops on the road. Put them out there. We got problems, you guys. We got major, major problems. So I'm begging you all to help us. I may not be able to buy a T-bone steak, but I could buy me a Prime. I just want to say, fight for us, and not us fight for you. When we voted for you to vote for the city of Schertz, to take care of us. So I am begging you, in Jesus' name, to help us effective today. Because before you know it, a little kid will be killed very soon on Columbia Drive. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you all out there in the city. I look forward to Brian seeing you very again soon, and thank you for all of your support. To the police department, help them. Please help them. They're short on help, and they're tired. So I'm begging you, in my closing, help us. And for you all that you know the voting is coming up, be careful, because we got citizens that's out here looking at you. Be careful what you put on Facebook, because it will bite you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, next item that we have on the agenda, we have several workshops tonight. The first one is a presentation on the recent Schertz Q event and an update regarding upcoming city events. It's like Mrs. Gonzalez and Mrs. Klepper, Mrs. Spence, all of you this evening.
We're going to tag team this presentation here. Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Mr. Kessel, Mr. Santee. Tonight for this workshop discussion, we are going to talk about the Schertz Q event that we had in September, and then also give an update on the upcoming city events that we have planned. I wanted to start this presentation and just kind of summarize and recap, provide a brief timeline of how we got to where we are today. So back in December of 2016, the Schertz Parks and Rec Foundation came to council and made the announcement that they were going to dissolve as a foundation. With that information, staff then had to look at the events that the foundation were putting on and evaluate and make a decision of how we wanted to move forward. In February, staff came to council with our recommendation that we did want to continue with the Jubilee event and also the Schertz Fest event, which we recommended rebranding and calling it Schertz Q. Part of our rationale for continuing these two events was that the involvement of staff with the planning and also the execution of the event, we were heavily involved with those events already. And so as we As we were looking at the events, we had 4 goals that we wanted to achieve on the screen. It was focusing on the why and what's important of the events, looking at the different elements that make the event. We wanted to break even on budget, so balancing revenue and expenses. This, of course, does not include staff time, but we did want to reduce staff time. And then also the last goal was to provide local community events that Schertz residents will enjoy. So with our Jubilee event, we feel very confident that we were successful in achieving all 4 of our goals. With Schertz Q, we did our evaluation of the event was that we had the barbecue competition as a main element. We did get rid of another element of the event, the carnival. We were still able to break even on budget. We actually made a little bit of revenue, of course, not including staff time. We did reduce staff time by about 12% for this event. And one of the goals that we realized and what we heard that we did not meet was the last bullet point. And we are going to discuss that in a little bit more detail, but I want to turn it over to Mary for the next slide to actually talk about the Schertz Q event and provide a little bit more information about what we did for the event.
Good evening. For our Schertz Q event, then we held the barbecue competition. It was a sanctioned cook-off, so we have a nice purse that we're able to offer for this event. The Kids Q was a new addition to the event. We had some food trucks, and we've been trying to introduce our food trucks into our events as we see more and more of them coming to the area. We had a business and a retail marketplace as well, and then, of course, the live music, which has been a part of all of our events that we've had. Our barbecue cook-off. 60 teams competed in 2017. That was 27 of those 60 teams returned from last year, from 2016. Our farthest traveled team came from Westlake, 299 miles away to come and compete in Schertz. So our teams came from as far north as Kyle and as far south as Westlake. 12 of our 60 teams call Schertz home, roughly 20%. We had 18 new teams to our competition this year. So while we've had larger numbers in the past, 2 factors affected our cook-off this year. Successful as it was, we still had Hurricane Harvey, that we know of a handful of teams that we spoke with let us know that they were not able to compete because of the damage that they sustained due to the hurricane. And then we had our sanctioning body, IBCA, added some money to another event in a different region than what we had, where we are in the region that we're in. They added it to a different region and increased that purse. So that had some of our teams traveling to the other city to go compete because there was more prize money there. But even having said that, we still had 18 new teams to our competition that had never been to Schertz before. Our grand champion of the cook-off this year, and a grand champion is determined by a cumulative point total of the 3 big meats, the chicken, the ribs, and the brisket. Top scorer in those 3 categories is deemed the grand champion. J.D. Williams with the team of Drop Teen Cookers is a Schertz resident. He was our grand champion this year. Okay. On the Kids Q, 8 teams we had competing. We were hoping for more. We had 8 teams, and this was a lot of fun to watch these young people with their grills, with their spatulas, with their pork chops, and their seasonings. And they cooked just as the adults do, and they were judged just as the adults were as well, too. On the food trucks, as I mentioned, we're trying to grow this a little bit more and really utilize our food trucks along with our other vendors that we've always had at the events. This gives our residents an opportunity to taste some different foods, not just your typical fare food that we have at our Jubilee or some of our other events as well, too. All right, so the business retail, this one is something that we always incorporate. We're trying to find things for our residents to do when they do come out to us, so we try to offer something there. They could do a little bit of shopping. And then the live music is always just a great portion to have. We heard some wonderful reviews on the bands that were here this year. The music was really, really wonderful. A nice blend of blues and country that we had. Okay. And that was Schertz Q for you.
Good.
All right. So as Mary laid out, we did have our Schertz Q event September 16th. Overall, we had several successful elements. And as Sarah mentioned earlier, of course, we did take a look at that 4th goal of providing an event that the community really comes out and enjoys. And so while we had successful elements to the event, we really didn't have the turnout or the feedback that we had really wanted. And so we kind of took a step back and looked at, okay, what does our whole calendar look like? What are we providing to the community on an annual basis? So looking at the calendar going forward, we've got this weekend, we've got our trunk or treat event, which we partner with the YMCA. We've got a lot of games and activities. We've got trunks out there. A lot of businesses come together and hand out candy for the kids. We've got the hay ride, we've got the hay maze, we have photo booths, and we've got the movie in the park. So lots of stuff in a 4 or 5 hour period for the families to come out and enjoy a holiday festive event. This event was well attended last year, and we're expecting similar attendance this year as well. Festival of Angels, so a month later, we're going to turn around and switch holiday seasons and turn on the holiday spirit with that event on a Friday night. So we'll have local music from different choirs and bands from the area schools. We'll have our lighted night parade, some vendors, and of course, a visit from Santa. This is an event where we do have a carnival or several rides that we'll bring out and mount Schertz. Those are all free for the public, so there's no cost for our residents to kind of come out and attend and enjoy those rides. Then starting off the new year, we will have our first Will and Check Walk for Life, which our first event of the year. It's going to be our 10th annual. We're going to try to make a big splash this year for that and raise quite a few funds for CTRC, who's the benefactor. In April, a month later, we've got our Movin' On Main event, which is going to be a new event. We're partnering with the YMCA again. This is going to be a family-friendly, focused on fitness event, kind of like Ciclovia in San Antonio. And so this is going to be bringing people to Main Street in a fun way that we can get the family out and moving around and have different activities and areas for folks to do different workout sessions. And then, of course, a couple months after that, we'll kick off our 4th of July Jubilee, our largest event in the community. It's an established event, great history. We've got our parade, we have live music, food, carnival, the fireworks, the whole bit, and that's a very successful event and very widely known. And then, of course, the Movies and Music in the Park series continues to grow. So 4 movie events and 2 music events. We're coming up on the 3rd year of that. So this is another opportunity. The music events tend to be midday, so families can come out on a Saturday afternoon and enjoy, nothing too late. And then the movie events tend to be in the evening. That's when the screen will allow you to see it. So looking at the bigger picture and kind of stepping back and reviewing the calendar, we looked at the last half of the year, July through December, we really have a lot of focus on those family-friendly carnival, festival type of events. And so reviewing that, our recommendation would be that Schertz Q, while we took away that festival element and we heard some feedback from folks that festival element or that carnival and live music and family-friendly event is important, maybe that's something we add to a springtime event where we're already heavy on that in the last half of the year, but not so much on the front half of the year. So our recommendation would be to keep Schertz Q, the sanctioned barbecue cook-off. We are in the barbecue circuit. We are one of the top ones to attend in the state of Texas. A lot of barbecuers really enjoy coming out, and it kind of puts us out there on that circuit. We want to continue to grow the Kids Q element. That was something that we tried out this year the first time, but we think it's got a lot of potential to really involve the community kids and bring that in. And then add a local cook-off element. There's several ways that we've been evaluating doing that, but maybe having local residents bring out their Weber and they can set up an area in the park and we grill for a certain specific food, whatever that might be, and that person, that resident, is deemed the best burger maker in Schertz, or bringing that local cook-off element. So having it maybe coincide with Schertz, with the barbecue, the sanctioned barbecue cook-off, but it's not really tied to that sanctioned part. So while some folks may be intimidated by that sanctioning, this may be a local alternative for folks to still participate in the event. And then, of course, maybe taking that fest part, the carnival and things like that the folks are wanting, and maybe adding it to a springtime event such as Music in the Park. It's something we do in the afternoon already, just bringing out a carnival or a couple of rides for folks to enjoy, as well as some food trucks and things like that. That would be, I think, a nice potential area to do that. So, questions?
All right, council. Mr. Edwards?
Guys, thank you so much for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. IBCA, they increased the purse in another part of the state. How much did they increase that purse by, and what did that take from our event?
So they increased it on, I believe, August 13th. So this was not something that we knew going into it. And they pick a random date, and it just happened to be September 16th, to an event in San Angelo, and they added $50,000 to the purse.
Okay. So going forward, I'm kind of a numbers guy, and I understand that we say we reduced the time of staff by 12%. But going forward, we need to establish some type of baseline for what we're actually spending and what we're bringing in. Do we have those numbers for a baseline going forward? Because that helps us budget also for the following year.
Yes, of course. Included as part of the agenda packet, we did put in there the revenue and expense report, the breakdown for that. So, the overall expenses, again, not factoring in staff time, but was $24,508, and the revenue was $26,850.
Just for a matter of record, that's why I wanted that produced.
Yes, sir.
Another thing, is there any other organization that we can bring forward that can step in and actually help us with this particular event? I know we say that the YMCA is taking over the movement on Main and so forth, but is there a possibility for us to bring any other organizations, volunteer organizations in the community to help with this as well?
Sure, and I think part of it, we did one thing Linda had touched on as far as trying to grow maybe that local, growing element. We did reach out to the school district just to kind of gauge their interest to see, hey, both Clemens and Steele have a culinary arts program, so maybe what about an Iron Chef style competition? Something to bring people out and a way to get not only just the people participating in the barbecue cook-off, but to have some of our kids and families come out to be able to interact or do something. They were receptive to the ideas, so I think with a year planning now, we can really delve into that and be able to have some cool things for other folks to do who may not want to just be a barbecue judge, which is also another area we reach out. The YMCA always helps us out and gives us a large group of their folks to come be barbecue judges, because that is one thing to put these events on. We need a lot of judges. We had 60 teams this year. Last year I think we had 84, and as you increase the number of teams, you increase the number of judges that you need. So.
Another thing, I think the mayor and I are probably the only two elected officials in this room that actually went to the grand opening of Cisco and saw their commercial kitchens up there. We have a great corporate partner in our city. Why don't we utilize that and leverage it? They also bring in chefs from around the world in their commercial kitchens, and they teach them to cook there. I think that's something that we should leverage. I would like to see you guys maybe think outside the box a little bit, or maybe think a little differently. I know we're saying it's the queue, right? But maybe we should add, and because we don't want to leave anyone out, and that's the way I see this. What about chili, gumbo, and crawfish, and have one unique festival? And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I think that there are people that may not want just barbecue, but they might like chili, gumbo, crawfish. I mean, I like food, period, but I just think that'll increase some of the participation, and some of the local vendors will come out for that as well.
Yes, and that is definitely something we can look into. Part of, Linda mentioned the best burger, but we could certainly do the best chili or the best, gumbo, or, to add that in there. So yes, there's definitely ways we can incorporate these ideas and still, but again, it's more focusing, knowing that the barbecue is, this is what this event is about. And if we want to have the festival element, September, it's still so hot. For those of you that may have been out there, it was 95 degrees, the humidity, it's a hot time of the year to have bands and music and sit in the sun. And it just, in our mind, that's why we would recommend to maybe tag it onto one of the Music in the Park series.
I think what Ms. Gonzalez was saying was, it's such a hot time of year, this is when we want to go out and have an ice cold drink. That's what she meant to say.
Water, right? Yes.
Last thing, you told us who won the Schertz queue, all right? But who, in the children, who won the kids queue? Because that's important to know.
Miss Natalie, hang on. Wyatt Donahoe was the,
Okay.
the young man that won the contest.
Good deal. Thank you guys so much.
Good. Mr. Crawford?
Couple of disjointed questions. We've gone to one day now, right?
Yes, sir.
Would we would we gain anything if we had Friday night, or I'm not saying Sunday would be a good day, but would we gain anything if we had a few more hours? I know it's hot. That's just one question. The second question, with a couple of school district members here, does the Steel Band and the Clemens Band, do they have some ensembles like jazz and those kind of things that might, maybe not on this event maybe, but maybe on some other events when it is cooler? Could we get anything from the school district band, from the school bands that might want to do something? Maybe they can't, maybe they don't want to, but it would bring the young folks out and give a chance to listen to some of their music that they might be able to do as ensembles as opposed to a full band.
Right.
And I don't know what else to come up with on ideas, but so what's been said already is pretty good. You're just, how do we get back, how do we make it be just a little bit bigger? I know the time of year is tough with the heat, as I've worked those events on the ticket booths, and it is somewhat miserable, but maybe we could adjust some things.
So to answer hopefully all of your questions that you or points you brought up, and I can appreciate that, as far as, I think a lot of the feedback that we did receive were for people who weren't involved with the barbecue. So they came out, kind of expecting what it was as last year. This is the first year that, we, the city, officially ran it and not the foundation. So yes, it was quite different, I think, from what they maybe remembered as coming out to. And so, that is something, but at the same time, it was still a successful event as far as the barbecue competition. If you drove by the park and you saw all the, trailers out there and the smokers and we had a lot of people in the park, and yes, aware that it is for the barbecue, but again, reaching, these ideas of how can we, incorporate and get, I think that's been a struggle that this event has had, is how to bridge the gap between, the barbecue cook-off and then having folks come out there, for our residents to be able to enjoy it. So we are looking into ways, as far as the Friday night event, that is certainly something, we can look at. There has been, in the past when the foundation ran it, there was the Tejano night on Friday night. And that is something that drew a lot of people out, but it was from surrounding communities that would come out for that event. But we can certainly, that was one thing we did talk about, is like, well, we could have some music on Friday night as the sun went down, so it is a little bit cooler. So all these were just kind of kicking around, but we do appreciate the input and the ideas as well. And then the band.
And to touch on the school district, the bands, they do have jazz ensemble bands, and we invite them out to Festival of Angels. That's where we'll have a lot of the local bands. Some of them are from the junior high, and some of them are from the high school. The high school, of course, it's depending on how far Clemens goes or Steele goes into playoffs. Just because it is on a Friday night. And so if they happen to be in playoffs and they're playing, the band travels with the football team. And so, but we do try to engage with them in that event. With Schertz Q, I believe the band has UIL in October. And so in September leading up to October, the band's really focused on their UIL performance and kind of getting that together. But we do bring them out for Festival of Angels and try to incorporate them into that.
Can we get the mayor to do that? We get the mayor to play?
And then, just another thing to touch on too is that September, is a busy time of the year. You have college football going on, you have high school football going on, you have county fairs in Comal and Guadalupe counties. So it is a lot of activities for our citizens to make decisions about what they want to go do on the weekend. But
Very good. Dr. Kaiser?
I know you said you didn't quite meet goal number 4, which I assume was based on the feedback you received, right? So if it's similar to the feedback that I got, the residents weren't necessarily really happy with, the barbecue competition, that's fine, but they didn't feel that it was for them. It's like, okay, they're having a barbecue competition, and so they ended up going, honestly, to a neighboring city for their fest. And I know it's hot in September, but it's hot 4th of July, and we do a carnival. If we're only going to do things in Schertz when it's not hot, we're not going to do a lot of things because it's hot a lot. you know, and I would really consider that feedback you got. I think we need to make it so you've got the cook-off and things like that, but to me, that's not really a resident-centered event now. And I think a lot of people, from what I heard, they really missed the Schertz Fest and the activities that they got in the past from that.
Yes, we can definitely take that, into consideration as far as going forward with it as well. So,
Mr. Thompson?
One of the observations, the music was excellent. But in the middle of a hot 95-degree humid day, when the band is playing and the direction they're playing, for anybody to sit and listen, they have to sit in the sunshine. I realize that there's acoustic problems with the pavilion. I appreciate the effort, but I wouldn't have wanted to sit in the sunshine and listen to the music. I mean, as good as it was, I was going to find some shade. Of course, I did by judging. But, so yeah, excellent music. We just have to come up with some type of something that'll help that, too.
Anyone else? Mr. Davis?
I'm not going to echo a lot of the points done. I heard the same things. Generally, it was comments from the residents. I'm not going to rehash all that. One question I had was on the competition. Is there a part of the competition that prohibits them from selling barbecue or to anybody that shows up? Is that banned as part of the competition?
So no, it's not. But part of, and we did reach out, because one of the ideas we were kicking around whenever we were first, kind of trying to figure out what we wanted to do with this event was this idea of maybe having, being able to do sample plates, right, for the teams to be able to, so residents or whoever could come out and buy a plate and get sample barbecue. We sent a poll to the teams that participate and have participated in the past year, and overwhelmingly the feedback was that would not be something they would want to participate in for several reasons. Some of the teams only have 2 or 3 team members, so everything that they're doing is just for the competition. And to do this additional thing, they're really focused on trying to win the money, so that's not something that they would want to participate.
Yeah, because I had heard a lot of comments from folks that they went down there and it's like, well, great, but the selection of food was minimal, and I know the rides are an issue. It's hot. It's a rough time for a festival, especially during the daytime. Not to change directions, but for what you're proposing for the potential for a springtime festival. And I know I had spoken to some of the folks before with regards to the ride carnival operators, and one of the problems is getting them that late in the season. The available choices for ride operators are limited, and actually last year I spoke to the company that does the rodeo, and they said, yeah, if you had something in the spring, it's a lot easier to find carnival operators in the spring than it is that late in the year with the Texas heat. What are you proposing for the fest for something in the spring? The reason why I ask is our smaller suburb to the south, San Antonio, has their fiesta that goes the 19th through the 29th. Could this be something where maybe Schertz looks at a fiesta-type event to tie in and be the northeast activity during that week? Is that something that could be feasible, or would that be getting involved in something that we want to stay away from?
It is difficult to get into their system and be a sponsored event as an official fiesta event. You have to have an event that's got 3 years worth of history that you can prove to the organization to submit it to them, and they tend to stick to Bexar County for you to have the events at. So we're just, if we were to do something, it would have to be at Crescent Bend, where we would be able to put some kind of an event on and we could go, because the criteria for it is just, it's pretty stringent to get into their system.
Maybe it's time for them to change their rules. All right, thank you.
Gentlemen, either one. All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation. Look forward to working with you over the next several months and figure out how we're going to go forward.
Thank you very much.
Good work. Thank you. All right, the next workshop we have this evening is the Local Flavor Incentive Policy Update. Mr. Kinnetetter, how are you this evening, sir?
Good evening. I promise not to be as long. I only have 4 slides.
It's all good.
Coming forward tonight as a follow-up, we've met a couple of other meetings to go over the local flavor policy, and wanted to remind you, when we initially had this discussion, we were rolling out the Schertz EDC policy at that time, and to be clear, the Economic Development Corporation is a separate entity and does have a dedicated revenue stream. They're also very restricted in what they can and can't do as far as economic development activities. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was to highlight other areas that the city would be able to participate in to help enhance the community through the local flavor activities that we hear about and that we want as far as retail and local opportunities for us as a community through those entrepreneurial and small business type of activities that we want and we truly do support. It's the ability of finding the right mechanism to be able to partner and to support and to provide a way to become involved. One of the, so we had put forward a suggestion and a recommendation in the budget that was not funded. The EDC still, one of the things that came out of that plan is, we do want that element of entrepreneurial and small business participation, and ultimately driving to create an environment and create the demand so that we have those local entrepreneurs that help to create those local flavor elements that we desperately want as residents of this community. So one of the things that I did want to bring up, and also just as background, one of the things that at the second time that we met were some of the best practices that have been used by other economic development organizations there at local or EDOs as they focus on entrepreneurship and small business. And the key here, as you'll see, it's less about incentives and more about creating that environment. It's recognizing the local demands that we have and moving barriers and really building that infrastructure and that ecosystem that allows those type of businesses that we want, that we refer to as this local flavor, to support and or to thrive and to establish within our community. And so you see these 5 points here, and we went through and we've evaluated different opportunities. Ultimately, as we look and those things that we have done have been through the Economic Development Corporation and funded and in line with what the state law allows. And one of the key things was this assistance center. So as you see, one of the key things was in providing information and technical assistance. And so in August, we officially rolled out the Assistance Center on the Economic Development Corporation's website. As you see, there are 4 major components to it: the market information, the available properties, development assistance, and partners. The idea here is that these are common questions and information and resources that all businesses, not just those that are targeted by the Economic Development Corporation that help to create new demand for our region, but also those local flavor businesses also need this information. And I know, each of you have come to me with different, local flavor type of businesses that have needed help, and we've been able to use this resource. One of the things to note, just under 13% of our total web page views at the EDC are from these 4 pages, and so they're getting used. One of the other pieces that's crucial within the Assistance Center is, recognizing that the Economic Development Corporation, which is funded by, that we do have a funding mechanism for, that we can't do everything, and that, we don't provide all of the solutions, but there are partners that we can work with that do. Councilman Davis, you had mentioned the UTSA SBDC as being one of those partners that, they help businesses as they're starting up, but they also help with that financing component. And so actually with the chamber, we went down and we went and met with the SBDC, who we had known before, but, took the opportunity to spend an afternoon over there and learn more about all of the different resources that they have, and really learned about the different ways that they can help, different entrepreneurs and small businesses in setting up and also in growing their business. And so we have resources there. We're monitoring. We're seeing, how many people we're sending over there. All of those things we're tracking to see, establishing that baseline, Councilman Edwards, that you always talk about. One of the opportunities that we do have within the EDC, and this is something that solely on the staff level, so with Brian James and John and others, we have discussed. So one of the challenges that we ran into as we evaluated a local flavor incentive policy is this idea of fairness and in giving one business an incentive over another, and how we choose and who should choose and what criteria we use. And one of the things in going back to those key best practices, we realize that the Main Street area is one that has been a focus of the council for many years, that there is a local, a recent momentum of activity that's gone there. We have seen, new businesses locate to Main Street. We're starting to see activity. We know that the city has dedicated funds that they're moving and putting forward to there. There are specific ways, specifically through certain infrastructure improvements, that the EDC is able to participate. Now, to be clear, this is not the wayfinding signs or facade grants. This is literally helping to put in that infrastructure, and so there may be ways to partner with the EDC and also with the city projects that are out there, to be able to trade out some of the things that are being funded, and to go to the EDC and to ask the board of participating there. Ultimately, that helps remove this barrier of saying we're going to, and I'll just use a pizza restaurant as an example. Within Schertz, there are many different pizza restaurants, and there are others that would like to enter into the market. One of the things, by creating an environment that, in a dedicated area, that we want to see this new activity, that then, again, narrows that scope, and so it allows us to, as a community, as a whole, between the EDC and the City Council, to really invest into an area and to remove some of those barriers. So then it becomes less about the type of business and more about, creating that environment in which they can operate in. And so, ultimately, that is where we are at with the local flavor policy, is that the activities that are moving forward are under the Economic Development Corporation, where we have dedicated funding, and there are these spillover activities that we're able to participate in. And so in part it's coming back another time, and if there is specific area that we move forward to explore, happy to do that. Last time we came back and we identified some of the different organizations to go and to look about partnering with. We did not, staff did not get the answer to the direction to go out and explore other ideas. And so with that background, that is where we are at. There are some opportunities to move forward, but in part it would be from the city council to, to really recommend and relay back to the EDC board and say, let's target and focus on these specific areas in ways that is within, the law that we are able to do. And, EDC will move forward, and we'll continue to study those out and come back with a recommendation from the EDC board.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Mr. Davis?
I've been sitting here going through our Dropbox trying to find it. Do you remember when you showed us that slide? What month that was?
So the two times that we came was May 2nd and June 13th.
I thought it was the one in May. I'm trying to find that that slide you did, unless you still have it on that computer somewhere, where you showed what all the other local communities were doing.
I do not have it with
June
me.
13th, and what else was it?
That slide would have been on May 2nd. That was during a joint meeting.
I was just looking at all this. Where am I not finding this on here? Yeah, I understand the limitations with the EDC board. I just think that this would be probably a good time, especially with Main Street coming up, where if we could look at those other areas that Schertz is just not have, where we don't have defined policy with regards to assisting or encouraging business development in certain areas, especially, like I said, if we're going to be looking at Main Street and trying to implement that plan down there of making it more of a vibrant area and more activity down there. So I guess what I'm looking for is what steps does the council need to take to implement those other policies down there that are being done by Selma and Cibolo, and sort of leveling the playing field with as far as local development, more geared towards the smaller type businesses and not the stuff that's already being handled well by EDC, the big boxes, the job creators, and things along those lines.
Question, Councilman, because Kyle and I had discussions about this, because to some degree I think we viewed it as the city and EDC working together to bring that focus. And so if the target area is Main Street, for example, I think part of what we've discussed on a number of occasions, one is, as we've met with some of the small business owners who've looked to go to Main Street, what we heard them say is they can sort of deal with things on their site, renovate the property, bring in the equipment, hire the staff, etc., but they're limited on other things, such as parking is the one that continues to come up. Often those lots don't have room to cost effectively put in parking or put in enough parking. And so thus the idea was to look to EDC potentially as a source to fund communal parking lots, to shift that burden from the property owner to the city, where we can more effectively step in and deal with it. It serves everyone. It's not picking a winner and a loser. And frankly, small businesses started by entrepreneurs, they know the risk involved and they know the chances of success and failure. And that certainly is one investment, that it will be there and work for the next person as well. So if somebody takes a crack at something, isn't able to make a go of it for whatever reason, we haven't spent that money and flitted it away. It's there and is available for the next person. The other thing we can target, and as we've seen more activity, we discussed this, and as we presented to council before, we started with the Main Street Grant Program very broadly. As we start to see some more commercial development, the idea is maybe target that at those types of businesses that we want, so we get more bang for our buck with regard to that area, as we've created some momentum over the last few years. So again, it's not specific geared to a small business, but it's targeted for that Main Street grant that help with some of those building improvements. As we've talked about, we're looking to run to the Planning and Zoning Commission at their November meeting some adjustments to the floodplain ordinance, and then would come to council in early December that again would make that easier for those as well. And so particular to Main Street, I think as we've discussed, we felt like between those elements, that would be how we would approach it. And again, one of the advantages there is it lets us stretch our dollars, as the committee has talked about, to not only do the wayfinding and the monumentation, not only do ornamental lights, benches, tables, street improvements, sidewalk improvements, it lets us stretch our funds a bit going forward to tag team there. And then certainly if council said, we don't just want to focus on that local flavor on Main Street, then again, we can explore those other options going citywide. But if that was your focus, I think that's how that fit in, how we saw us being able to target it.
I brought up the table here, and what you had back in May 2nd was, it was everything under the general fund category, and we talked about entrepreneurship, small business, existing business, and target area, and for example, Main Street, and they were all things that the presentation had proposed for the city to start looking at or consider. And again, I'm looking at things like, again, in all the meetings we've had on Main Street and all the presentations we've seen from everywhere else, part of this is getting as much bang for the buck as possible down there. And we've talked about that in our meetings, but on the same token, we have the matching grants program for Main Street District now, which is geared towards historical buildings, correct?
Older than 50 years, yes, sir.
Older than 50 years. But, I mean, what would be the impact to maybe expand that for Main Street for a facade program? So that if there's an existing building that's not in the historical category, it's less than 50 years, but if somebody wants to improve the facade of their building, which in turn helps the appearance of Main Street and helps us revitalize that area down there. So that's what I'm looking for, is what recommendations from staff can we get to look at alternative things like, again, targeted on Main Street for a facade area. And then when we talk about general fund potentials, again, I know it's a fine line of what business gets assistance and which one doesn't, or how you do that. I mean, don't look forward to the discussion on it. I know it's contentious, but again, if the goal is to revitalize Main Street, then how do we encourage those folks to get down there? If we do it right and we make improvements down there, then over time that will certainly help. But it's one of those things where I think it's worthwhile to at least have the discussion to see if we want to kickstart that program down there.
So, speaking from the EDC, one of the things that is helpful, EDC, we're able to participate really in two broad categories with projects. Those that create primary jobs are those that generate new money for the region. That's a primary job. Mm-hmm. Or we can do infrastructure that promotes new and existing business. Now, in part, hearing direction from the council of Main Street is an area to look forward at. I mean, from a staff level, we've gone through and evaluated different areas that we may do this. Main Street is definitely one of those options. Again, if we go back to that list of best practices, one of the key things that we should do in economic development is to remove those barriers. Main Street, one of the challenges with Main Street is there are multiple barriers. And so if we can address those public improvements that allow, that does free up money that they're not finding off, additional parking on site, that they are able to do some of those improvements. And we've seen that very recently with some of the businesses that have gone on Main Street. They're having to choose with their dollars, do I do this improvement or this improvement, because it only goes so far. And so having, the EDC and the city come in with those other improvements to the area helps to build momentum for a larger area.
And so maybe to tie onto that, I think the idea that we've talked about with the Main Street Committee is to get really enough bang for our investment, not to spend a substantial amount of money and feel like, okay, we kind of partly got there but didn't really get there fully. And so by having EDC, requesting that EDC look at that thing that clearly they can do, expands our pot of money. The other is, again, broadly, if we were to look at monies left over from the 2009 street bond, adding that, the idea would be like, we feel like we're getting very close to being able to hit that list of items that the Main Street Committee members have come up with to say, if we did these, we feel like we've made enough impact that somebody going down there has a very different impression. So that was the idea to stretch. The other then becomes, how do we help those folks looking to go in on a particular As we said, I would not underestimate the impact of having that parking provided that they don't have that cost associated with. But certainly what we've got are the fee waivers that are fairly substantial, the adjustments to some of our ordinances to make it easier. And then the other is if we really feel like that extra bit is that cash infusion, for those structures that are over 50 years old, again, we can refine the program, target it to businesses, potentially is that Main Street grant. And then again, we can look at doing a facade improvement program that we may have to fund from general fund, but with a fairly small dollar figure, because frankly, I don't think it needs to be very big. You know, if we looked at starting with $20,000, the fact is if we get people coming in and using that money up over $20,000 one year, $20,000 second on a couple of projects and a couple of the Main Street grant, then we probably sit there and say we feel like we've turned the market and we can scale that back because now we have the momentum we need to. So I think what I'm hearing the direction is let us go back and look at using a targeted facade improvement program like, for instance, San Antonio has and some other cities for those non-historic, tapping general funds potentially, figuring out what we need to do to make that happen that we think we can do fairly cost effectively, coupled with going to EDC for those hard infrastructure costs to really get the bang for our buck, and then refining the Main Street grant program, again, now that we've had so much interest, to hit the businesses of the kind we want that, again, continue to promote historic preservation, which allows us to tap hot funds for that.
Perfect.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Mr. Edwards.
You know, it is not a function of government to provide cash for inventory, for equipment, and working capital. It is not. However, we do have the Small Business Administration, so I do agree with that. We also have some great partners in this community: Compass Bank, UTSA. I myself took my own credit line and went and opened and established a business for myself, for my family. And guys, I can certainly tell you I knew the risk going in, but I also did the business plan. I did the market analysis. I did all those things before I went in. So it was kind of like going in with eyes wide open. Therefore, it is also not a function of government to get involved in my real estate contract with my home as well. So I think about that. And going forward, I know we want to give some type of incentive, but you brought up the idea of maybe helping with permits and so forth. I just recently returned from Oktoberfest, and I can tell you I spoke with some of the city leaders in New Ulm, Minnesota, and those guys made some very interesting commentary about crucial mass or critical mass and being able to have people in one location and showcasing the city to all the visitors. So we see this event of a town of 15,000 people, and all of a sudden it swells to 150, 200,000 people in attendance. You know, I got to tell you, it speaks volumes. I actually took a lot of photos, and I want to share those at our next Main Street meeting, because I think there are some things that we were already discussing that they've done, and we can learn from it. So I do agree with you when it says that we need to get to a critical mass or get to a crucial point in development where we assist them with some of the infrastructure. I think that is paramount before we start even thinking about doling out any type of even permit fees, even laxing those. I think that what we need to do is get to that point where we spend the money on the infrastructure. Thank you.
Anyone else? I think we look forward to whatever you can bring to us, and council will evaluate its options and see what direction we want to take.
So we will likely have some action items then in terms of pushing some of these things forward, either the next meeting or the meeting after, and maybe both as well.
Whatever time's necessary. Thank you. All right, next item that we have on the agenda this evening is a workshop and direction from City Council regarding training for City Council and council-appointed boards, commissions, and committees regarding how social media use may be impacted by the Public Information Act, Open Meetings Act, and records retention policy. So, Mr. Santee, it's all yours, sir.
All right. Going to get a little assistance here.
You bet.
Pull it up. And then just my arrows. Okay. Which one? This one or this one? This one?
That one.
All right. Perfect. All right. Good evening, council, mayor, Mr. Kessel, staff. So this, I believe, began back in August. I was not at the meeting when this was first discussed as to coming up with training for the council as well as boards and commissions on social media and how that relates to the Public Information Act and the Open Meetings Act. That later evolved to include the records retention. And so what we're hoping for tonight is I've got some bullet points I'm going to run through and get direction from council, make sure we've captured all the elements that you want in that formal training. I was talking to Mr. Kessel before the meeting started as to when that would roll out officially. Would really like to do that with the council first, if possible, in one of the retreat settings perhaps. Make sure that we're good with that before we roll that out to your various boards and commissions, maybe in one session or maybe in their regular meetings. So that's where we are tonight. And I will tell you just a couple of this is kind of our purpose statement behind this. And I can tell you give you a couple of examples of where we're at just really in the world today. I was doing a presentation just last week with the Risk Management Fund for the Texas Water Conservation Association. They're having their annual meeting in San Antonio. And I was speaking on the Texas Public Information Act. Another colleague of mine was speaking on the Open Meetings Act. We rolled some social media aspects into that training just to measure where this group was at that we were speaking to. And one of the things I asked them when I was starting out was, how many of them were, had smartphones, had their smartphones with them, and went through a series of questions. How many of you are on social media right now? Because I'm not a very dynamic speaker, I guess. So I had a pretty good feeling I was going to capture some folks on social media. And so my follow-up question was, first of all, how many of you are here? Are you board members? Are you general managers? What if someone right now is emailing your general manager with a Public Information Act request for all this various information? Is any of that going to be included with whatever you're doing on social media right now? And it all depends, right? And that's what, as we went through going through these bullet points, it was interesting to me in working with your staff and even with Charlie Zeck and Clarissa Rodriguez, how much disagreement we had over what the act actually says and what that's actually going to apply to. When we took that conversation, we could all agree on what is a meeting in a traditional sense. What is public information in a traditional sense? What records do we have to retain? But when we took this social media aspect and we dumped the traditional into that, or dumped it into the traditional, those lines got a lot more blurry as to what we could all agree on and how that would be handled. There's a lot of reasons for that. It starts at the very, very top, and I don't mean with the mayor or the city manager, I mean the president, because those lines have become blurred as to what is an official Twitter, what is not an official Twitter. And then you have the National Archives getting involved saying, hey, quit deleting those tweets. Those are official statements from the President of the United States. Those are in the White House. So we have all of that's our environment today. That environment didn't exist when I started practicing law. I didn't have to worry about that. I didn't have to train boards and commissions on that. I didn't have a smartphone. I didn't have a cell phone. And so this is the reality of where we are, though. And we're not getting agreement even at that highest level as to what's going to be included in that. We don't have agreement from our state legislature. They could have fixed this. They didn't. Just this year, they had an opportunity to address some of this, and they did not address it because I don't know if they know the answers or want to know the answers. Some states have. So we don't even have agreements when you're in different states as to what's going to be treated how with social media. So what we hope to do tonight is agree with you on some bullet points as to what we want it to mean here in the city of Schertz with our council and our boards and commissions. If that means it ends up in some type of policy, fine, that's up to you. Doesn't have to. But absent a policy, we're going to be relying on the written law and however black and white we can agree that is. And to this point, I'm thinking we're going to have a hard time getting a room full of people to agree because it's such a moving target. So I will go through these and then we can discuss and to see if these are at least the topical areas that we think we need to cover in the training itself. So the Local Government Records Act, this will be part of it because this is what we call your Records Retention Act. It's chapters 201 through 205 of the Local Government Code, and it defines what is a local government record. And if you've read it, it's a paragraph. I don't have a slide for it because it won't fit on one slide. It is literally a paragraph. And then it says, well, except not these things. And it accepts out drafts, working documents, memos, notes. Well, I can tell you when we get over to the Texas State Library Archives Commission, they're the ones who provide you the guidelines, right? And they're the ones who give you the different categories. They're the ones who tell you which records are not subject to retention, which are those that I was referring to. Maybe your notes from a meeting, maybe various things such as that. The problem is, it sets the minimum, right? You can go beyond that. I have a city I represent, I shall not name and shame, but we had a records request for records they were about to destroy that were over 3 decades old. And I was like, why do we have a room full of records that aren't important records that are over 3 decades old? There was really no reason to keep those, but they got to keep them a little bit longer because someone didn't want them destroyed, so they kept submitting Public Information Act requests so that those records could not be destroyed. This is one of the little quirks in the Public Information Act. So it sets the minimum times. You can keep things longer. It's a good guide, though, and we'll train on that. Here's the interesting thing, though. When we get to the Public Information Act, and we're going to include that, what it defines as public information, I think, again, we get into opinions, I believe it's broader than what is a government record defined under the Records Retention Act. The reason why I say that is because all those things that the Records Retention Act says you don't have to retain as a local government record, if I get a request for public information before that is disposed of or otherwise given the shredder, it's got to be retained. It's now subject to the Public Information Act. I have a pending request, and if it gets released to one person, I mean, it's going to be released to all. So there are all these caveats, and so that's why it's important that this training touch on all of those, because the different statutes treat these things differently depending on where they are in their lifeline. In the Public Information Act, it has to be official business. What is official business? That's one point of discussion that we'll have. What is the transaction of official business? What constitutes that? And so therefore, when are the documents subject? Because it has to hit those two things before they're subject to the Public Information Act. The tricky thing with that act, as y'all know, is we don't get to make that call, right? We don't get to make that decision because there's a cottage industry in Austin for new graduates of law school to be employed by the Attorney General to make those decisions for us. So 200 newly minted attorneys are over there churning through all these requests for public information and coming up with their best guess based on a template created by their boss as to what should be released and shouldn't be released, and what gets to be redacted and what doesn't get redacted. We don't get to make that decision. The Open Meetings Act will have to be covered in this training. It defines what a meeting is. There's also penalties, as you know. There's penalties for the PIA as well, but there's penalties for the Open Meetings Act, criminal and civil. It provides exceptions. But the core question is always going to come back to, well, what constitutes a meeting? Simple when we all know this is a meeting. This is the easy one. This is the king of hypotheticals right here, because he can make me agree, disagree, and swear I don't know, depending on the hypothetical he throws at me on what constitutes a meeting. And it's that it can get that complicated. But what we want to do is educate our boards and commissions so that they have all that information and they can avoid even the appearance of something that is not a meeting to seem like a meeting. And we're getting to the point now where those meetings don't have to take place. We don't have to all be physically present, right, to have a meeting. There are exceptions in the Act that allow us to meet via video conferencing or even teleconferencing. But they don't have exceptions for everything. They haven't created all of those to allow us to do straight online meetings where everybody's elsewhere. Now, they have for themselves, though, if you look at it, they've carved out some little exceptions for committees within the legislature or certain governing bodies to do things that the rest of us aren't allowed to do. But what we want to avoid is, and what the training will talk about, is how we can avoid even that occurring without our intentions. if that makes sense. Because intent is still one of those things that's required in any of these acts. So among all those, these are the things that the social media considerations are going to kind of flow through all this training, right? So each one of those are going to be, they're going to be intertwined. They won't be, the social media considerations won't be set out separately within the training. It'll be a part of each one of those. But we're going to talk about under the, when does a social media post become a local government record subject to retention? Is that even possible, right? I mean, we want to talk about that. Or do they fall into that category of things that don't have to be retained? Is it even a record of any sort? Under the Public Information Act, when does a social media post become subject to the Public Information Act? I think it might be broader than when it becomes a local government record. I have no established authority to base that on. That is my opinion, reading between the lines of our Attorney General where his opinions are going, because he makes statements like, well, like for a meeting, for example. If you pull out your handbook, you'll probably have one of those. The public information and the public meeting, the open meeting handbook will tell you that, well, for there to be a meeting, there needs to be deliberation by a quorum, and et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that's required is, what? A verbal exchange. And we went round and round about this because it seems very straightforward. It was a verbal exchange, but the Attorney General goes on to very helpfully say, well, there could also be an exchange of written documents or electronic mail. And I'm like, no, it can't. I mean, that's not what it says. That's not what the case law says. But that gives us clear indication what he's thinking, right? And where the Attorney General views this or how they view this. And so we have to keep that in mind as well, but we can't train on what could happen, what might happen. We can just tell you, here's what it says currently, but understand that there's this opinion being expressed by your current Attorney General. And we can look to other states where they handle things differently. But that will be part of it, is just trying to, it's like nailing Jell-O to the wall, honestly, but we're going to try to gather all that into some meaningful training. Under the Open Meetings Act, there is what is the impact on the Open Meetings Act by LGC 551-006? That, as you might know, is the message board provision that they added to the Open Meetings Act, where that does not constitute a meeting if you're on an official. I mean, there's a lot of requirements in there if you're going to do that. It's not to be undertaken lightly. It's a lot of considerations have to go into that, and I'm not recommending that. The training won't recommend that, but we do have to make you aware that that's the only known exception where it can't be considered a meeting if you're utilizing that vehicle. So if you go off of that, then you're on your own. If it's not within the confines of that. All right, so that's going through and I understand that was not a lot of bullet points, but at the same time, this is going to be what I hope to be very focused. But if we need to add more, that's why I'm here, to get that direction before we finalize what that's going to look like and roll it out.
All right, counsel, questions for Mr. Santee? Mr. Thompson?
I understand the desire, I'm going to use a phrase carefully, to use the council as guinea pigs before we expand it to other groups within the city. One of my discussions with Gary Inman, school board trustee who was here tonight, earlier in the day, was the potential of involving other elected groups within our city, such as SCU, CIC, SD, or Green Valley, whatever, but maybe collaborating on this so that the training benefits others. When you've reached the design, maybe past the design stage, I understand, but just an idea to throw out down the road.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Crawford?
Well, I asked to put this on the agenda several weeks back, and the mayor obliged. I was asking more from the policy standpoint than the training standpoint, to try to have something in place if we had a problem. We've had some training, but we do need training on this also. So I'm not complaining about what we're doing. I'm just saying that I was interested in the policy and the information so we don't get in trouble using social media. Because I don't do much on Facebook, and if I don't do much on Facebook, it's a lot harder to get in trouble by saying something that could be misinterpreted or reinterpreted other ways that are not my intent. I don't want to see that happen with me and the city issues, because that's taking the city along for a ride that they may not want to be on, and that's not exactly what I want to do. So that's, whatever you can do to train us and help us is certainly very important. But also, I'd like to kind of look at the potential for having some policy in place. Other companies have it in place, and that's kind of where I was coming from.
Sure, and that's a council determination.
Yeah, yes, it is. Yes, it is. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying that we're not on the wrong track. I would just like the track to be as inclusive as possible to provide some guidance with other things that go on around other organizations so we don't get in trouble more accidentally than on purpose. Thank you.
And Mayor, if I could address the one
Please.
comment regarding treating the council as a guinea pig. Simply because the boards of commissioner are appointed by this council. So that training that they're going to receive needs to have your, in my opinion, seal of approval. I don't want to, I would prefer to have it with the council first. I just think that's the proper order to do the training in. So yes, you are a guinea pig. I guess that's me saying you are the guinea pig, but I don't view it that way. I view it as this training is coming to you first so it can then go to the citizens you appoint.
Yeah. Mr. Thompson?
One recent example that just shows that there needs to be some type of training. When the Chamber was getting ready to host the Meet the Candidates Forum, there had been a post earlier within 2 or 3 days, maybe the same day of, that counts or that an elected official could not post a comment on something that could be coming up on an agenda or might have come up on an agenda, come up again. And based on that, the question was, well, then how can you discuss anything in a Meet the Candidates Forum? Research found that Senator Campbell had authorized legislation saying that Meet the Candidates is exempted from that. So I think that's just an example that there's a lot of confusion.
Right, and that's a new law.
Clarity,
so
and whatever clarity you can add would be appreciated.
Right, that's new legislation that was just passed, just went into effect. So that doesn't surprise me that there was confusion on that. And actually that legislation was really driven by this area, the cities in this area, because of that confusion. So
yeah. Anyone else? I guess I have a question, Mr. Crawford. When you say policy, because I don't understand. So if the council wants to ask staff and our attorney to come up with a pro forma, if you will, what policy outside of just training? Help me understand what you're looking for or looking at.
I feel there should be some statements that say what we should and shouldn't be doing with respect to social media as it impacts the city. It's okay if I say whatever I want to say about my personal life on Facebook. But if I start saying things about the city, I have to be very, very careful how I phrase it so that I'm not causing a problem for the city by saying something that may not be correct, may be inaccurate in all respects, and I didn't realize it. It's one thing if I don't realize it. It's something else if I did it intentionally, and those kind of things. The people in some of the corporations, there are people in companies today that have been terminated from their job for making comments on Facebook that were in reference to the company they worked for. And I can see how that happens, and I don't want to see that. The training is certainly a part of what policy would be, But I'm not sure how I can answer what the policy is, because I don't know what policy is, because some of this is sort of uncharted territory, but we're seeing it from business side and not so much from other cities. But I'm not saying we shouldn't do training. I'm just saying I don't know exactly what the policy should be. But if it should be, we don't need to say anything about the city on our personal Facebook account. That might be good policy. It may not be, but I'm not trying to, it's not an infringement on rights. It's a protection of our city, because we have to be held to a higher standard.
Can't agree. Mr. Thompson?
It's just saying, not necessarily policy, but maybe best words of wisdom are, and bullet point some words of wisdom for the training.
Right. Part of the training is usually best practices. And now in this area, that's going to be really a combination of what we see being done elsewhere, potentially even other states, how they handle it. The reality for a council member, okay, it's the fortunate and unfortunate reality for a council member. And you heard it from your citizens tonight. It doesn't matter probably what you're saying or how you're saying it on Facebook. They see you as the elected council members for the city of Schertz. Fair or unfair, you can't control that. I can't control people seeing me speaking for Denton Navarro if they know me to be part of that firm. And so that's kind of that line that we will address in the training, as well as just trying to help you navigate that, giving you tools where you can navigate those things.
Yes, Mr. Gutierrez?
I think my biggest concern is what is public information. You know, when you have a committee that has 5 members and then they're discussing, city business, and there's 4 of them on the discussion, then we have to set guidelines as what would be considered a public record, public information at that point. I think that would be the biggest issue. What individuals post individually really doesn't concern me, but it's when a group starts making discussions regarding different topics. I think that's where the guidelines need to be posted.
And I think that's largely covered under the Open Meetings Act, right? Because if we're posting things and as a hypothetical, we have a post on Facebook by an individual member of the council that says a comment or thought about what an item that's before the city, and another person tweets about it that's on the city council, and another person decides that they're going to put a post on Facebook, and another one hits something somewhere else, does a 45-second Snapchat video, and when we get to 4 folks doing that, even on different social media outlets, we potentially have established a discussion amongst a quorum. And I think that's covered by the Open Meetings Act and not something that we actually have to cover. I guess for me, I think it's our duty as a council to have our attorneys educate and inform us. I think it's important that our attorneys educate and inform our appointees to the various boards, committees, and commissions. But I think that should be the full extent of what we do as a body. I don't think that we should direct what can or cannot be said, should restrict what can or cannot be said, or in any way really seek to proactively control what people say. I think that's absolutely antithetical to the message of the First Amendment. And I'm not trying to turn this into a First Amendment argument, but I think even if we tried to do so, that either trying to legislate behavior would either fail or it would get challenged in court very, very quickly. I believe that every person on this council, every resident that has signed up and is serving on a board, committee, and commission has a right to say and post and do just about whatever they want to do, including doing stupid things. And it's not something that we can legislate or even control, because if they decide they're going to do it anyway, they're going to do it anyway. I can't at all get my head around making an attempt to tell folks what they can and cannot say that's not already dealt with by the Open Meetings Act, the Public Information Act, or the one that you added this evening is the
It's basically the records retention.
the records retention. If folks want to act foolishly, it's their right to act foolishly. I just don't think it's something that we can successfully control, and frankly, we would lose if we tried. Mr. Edwards.
So to akin to what the mayor is saying, is, and listening to the dialogue from my colleagues on the dais, I'll say this. It is true that we all need training. It's obvious. It's obvious. It's not only Schertz that needs training, but from what I'm hearing Mr. Emmons say is that they need training at the school district. I can certainly say our neighbors, some of our neighboring cities could definitely use that training as well, and that's putting it mildly. But if this training and this workshop turns into a vested policy for the city driven by the council, I would be okay with that as long as it's driven after the training. As long as we as long as we have taken the time and dissected and tried to get the best out of it for everyone involved, not just the staff, not just the city council, but also for our committee members, our team appointees. I think if it's rightfully divided, I would not have a problem with it turning into a policy, as long as we've done our due diligence as leaders in this community. As long as we've done our due diligence, I would not have a problem with that, as long as we've done our due diligence.
Dr. Kaiser?
Okay, a lot of you know I am for a policy, to be honest with you. I am all for the First Amendment. I totally agree. I don't agree with saying what someone just posts personally doesn't affect us. I heard a rumor this past week based on a post that was, made previously by a council member, that we as a council are now seen as racist, the entire council, because of what one person posted. So what one person does can affect all of us. And I think at minimum we should have guidelines, expectations when it does come to some personal posting. I don't post anything political. I just stay away from that. I don't post controversial things. And I would never want to put something on social media that put the rest of the people sitting up here on this dais termed as a racist or a sexist or anything else that's negative. And I can tell you, I am really upset to be put in that category because of nothing I did, but because of what someone else did. So I think we do need to have some guidelines and some expectations, not just what's in open meetings but I think we do need to hear something in the training when it comes to what can be the repercussions, not just for that council member or the boards or commission or committee member, but for everyone on that particular board or council, as well as the city itself.
Yeah, informing, I think giving examples of what repercussions can be, of the effect that things can have on elected bodies makes sense. Again, educating and informing. I can't get my head around saying you shall not do this or you will not do that. I don't think that is at all the purview of this body at all. Educating and informing, absolutely. Offering opinions on potential best practices, certainly. Codifying an ordinance or expanding our code of ethics that says you may post this and you may not post that, and you may post this and you may not post that, is going to be utterly ineffective and frankly I couldn't get my head around going down that path at all. I would consider it an affront to every one of us, our right to say what we want to say, even if we disagree with one another. I mean, one of the most interesting things I read and starting to look at this, particularly with regard to Schneck versus the United States and Oliver Wendell Holmes' commentary in his decision on that particular item, his almost 180 that he gave in Abrams versus the United States. There's really no place for a government body to restrict speech of its members or of its citizens. I can't get my head around that at all, even if it's harmful. Even if it's harmful. Even if it's complete dissent. There's a building in Boston that was donated by one of the signers of the Declaration. And when he gifted the building, he said that, and I can't remember if it's the second floor or the third floor. He said, this space must always be open for the free exchange of ideas, regardless of their content. And it exists and is still used today in that way. This is the ultimate, if you will, in a public forum. We must be able to express dissenting ideas, even ideas that might be considered subversive, might be considered inappropriate. It's not for us to judge. The people will judge us at the ballot box, rest assured. And I think that's the proper place for the decisions about whether or not something is appropriate or inappropriate speech. And I feel incredibly strongly about that. And I know that, Dr. Kaiser, you may feel very strongly in another direction, and thank goodness and thank God that we live in a country where we can be diametrically opposed in the way that we feel about things. But ultimately, as is sometimes pointed out to me, I don't have a vote. That'll be a decision that this council will have to make. I only get to share thoughts and argument. So that said, Mr. Crawford.
Mr. Santee, help me out with a question I have for you, since you're the lawyer and I'm not. In our charter, based on what the mayor just said, in our charter we have a provision that if you have a criminal issue against you, we can vote a supermajority and ask somebody to step down.
I'm sorry, what was
In our charter,
right?
If a council member has a criminal issue, we can vote to have the council member step down.
I think actually what it says is that if a member of this council is finally convicted of a felony,
Yes.
they are deemed to have forfeited their seat.
Yes.
Right.
That's a penalty that we have.
Okay.
So if we're putting policy in place that defines a restriction on our things to do, it's not just the ballot box that can control a councilman, it's the council itself also.
But that's the charter that says that if a final conviction of a felony,
Yes.
And the charter is actually the words of
You voted on it.
It is not the words of the council. It is the document that constricts and governs us as elected officials, as opposed to it being something promulgated by the council.
So should we have a policy that is approved by the voters?
That would be an option if the council wanted to put something before the voters and have them decide whether or not they wanted that to be part of the charter. Of course. It is always, in my mind, appropriate to put it in the hands of the voters if that's what we decide we want to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's no greater wisdom in this body or of us as individuals than exists in the aggregate of the voters, without question. Agreed. So, Mr. Sandy, I have a question for you, though. Do you have what you need from the council after all of that discourse?
I do.
Go forward in preparing what you need to prepare for the council.
I'm looking forward to the training, actually, more now that I've heard the discussion. So I do have enough. I'll be working with Mr. Kessel and the staff to schedule that time when we'll do that. So.
In the spirit of making sure that we have free speech for everyone pursuant to the First Amendment, I do think that we should start with the council and with the training. And I do think that Mr. Crawford and Dr. Kaiser need an opportunity after we've had that training to revisit. They may say, gosh, guys, you've just made me feel like I need to redouble my efforts because now I really think that we need to do this, and here are my reasons why. That dialogue needs to go on, not be stifled. So I think that when we do that training, whatever we post should also be posted so that the council can continue a discussion so that every view can be heard.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Edwards.
Can I make a suggestion that we do the retreat, instead of doing the retreat typically at one of the local hotels like we've been doing, this particular issue may bring up a lot of people, who knows? Why don't we hold that particular retreat in here? Just for seating purposes.
For that particular training and that particular topic, I think that'd be a great idea.
We'll schedule something outside our normal retreat schedule then for that.
Yeah, it's probably a big
available
enough
to the
thing for
public.
us to take up separately at a special called session.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Stancy, thank you, sir. All right, the next item we have are the consent agenda items. Staff has asked that we take up item number 3 outside of consent, gentlemen, because there are a couple changes that we need to be made aware of. However, the consent agenda then reads as follows. Item number 1, minutes, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of October 10, 2017. Ordinance 17S39, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending Part 3, Schertz Code of Ordinances, the Unified Development Code, UDC, Article 1, General Provision, repealing all ordinances, parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date. Item number 4, Ordinance 17S41, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending Part 3, Schertz Code of Ordinances, the Unified Development Code, UDC, Article 4, Section 21.4.15, Public Infrastructure Improvements, Construction Plans, and Community Facilities Agreements, and associated updates in UDC Articles 9, 12, and 16, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, and providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date. Item number 5, Ordinance 17S42, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending Part 3, Schertz Code of Ordinances, the Unified Development Code, UDC, Article 4, Section 21.4.3, Notice Requirements and associated update to UDC Section 21.5.4.c. Point 2, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date. And item number 6, Resolution 17R92, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a public library interlocal agreement with Guadalupe County, Texas, and other matters in connection therewith. Are there any other items, or any items that need to be pulled and considered?
Mr. Mayor, point of privilege.
Mr. Edwards?
I would hope that the council would agree with this, so I'm going to ask that we move items number 8, 9, 10, and 12 to consent, since they were already a part of the budget process or processes that we've seen in the past. And I'd actually like to make a motion that we move items 8, 9, 10, and 12 to consent.
I second that motion.
I see no reason in the rules why you can't do that, so I have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions from council on the motion? I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays to move items 8, 9, 10, and 12, I believe was the motion, to consent. In order for those items to be considered under consent, I do have to read their descriptions and or captions. Item number 8 is cancellation of the November 7, 2017 City Council meeting. Item number 9, calling a special meeting November 20th, 2017, for the purposes of canvassing the results of the November 7, 2017 general election. Item number 10, Resolution 17R90, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement for the purchase of 8 police patrol vehicles. And item number 12, Resolution 17R95, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, regarding the submission of a grant application in an amount up to $76,767.47 to the Office of the Governor, Homeland Security Division for the State Homeland Security Grant, or HSGP program, and authorizing the acceptance of the funds upon award. Is there a motion to approve the items under consent?
So be it.
Second.
I have a motion for Mr. Crawford, a second for Mr. Thompson. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 So then finally, items numbers 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 12 were passed under consent. Next item that we have before us this evening is item number 3, Ordinance 17S40, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending the Part 3, Schertz Code of Ordinances, the Unified Development Code, or UDC, Article 3, Boards, Commissions, and Committees, and associated updates in UDC Articles 4, 8, 9, 11, and 14, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date.
Good
Good evening.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for allowing us to pull this off consent.
You bet.
So there were 3 minor changes from the last time we made this presentation. So just a refresher, UDC Article 3 is the boards and commissions. We made some cleanup changes, and then the addition of the Building Standards Commission. So the first change is actually in the ordinance to the effective date. When we had originally proposed it, it just stated, shall be effective upon the date of final adoption, and we're actually requesting to change that to effective upon the date of November 30th. The reason behind this change is we started working on the actual ordinance that will create that body, and we want to take that to council for hearing in November, so we want to make sure that they kind of coincide with their effective dates. That way we don't have UDC language that's effective, but we don't have this board actually created. So that's the first change. The second change was actually brought to our attention by a planning and zoning member, that this last sentence that you see, once you read it, does not make sense. No city official shall not be liable. Got the double negative. That's how it currently reads in the UDC. So while we're already making that modification to change BOA to the Planning and Zoning Commission, we discussed it as staff and with Dan, and we're just going to remove that sentence that is in blue. It's just not needed, just clean up. And then the other change, it's not really a change, it's just a correction in the attachment, the ordinance attachment. So if you remember, there was a long list of kind of sections like this that was just change BOA to Planning and Zoning Commission, change this to that, that kind of thing. Somewhere along the lines in merging the attachments, we got this situation, which is incorrect, and it should look like this. So you see here, you have a 211136 and then a 2111-4J, and somewhere along the lines they got combined into one. So we're just proposing to have that corrected to actually be the 2111-4J fix. And I actually have all of these changes already drafted, ready for Brenda in a corrected ordinance with those 3 modifications.
Very good. Council, questions?
I just want to say thank you guys, because the other night we were going through this rather quickly, and because we took our time and kind of went through it methodically, we found other errors. So thank you so much for coming back to this.
Sir.
Very good. Mr. Thompson? No? Is there a motion to approve Ordinance 17S40?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, I think a second from Mr. Davis. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 6 ayes and no nays, the motion carries. Thank you, ma'am. All right, next on the agenda this evening, we'll go back to the regular order and discussion items. Number 7, Ordinance 17S43, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, amending Part 3, Schertz Code of Ordinances, the Unified Development Code, UDC, Article 14, Section 21.14.6a, sidewalks and hike and bike trails requirements, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance, providing a severability clause, and providing an effective date. So you have this one as well.
I do have this one as well.
All right, very good. It's all yours.
So as you remember, this is just, we were trying to make the modification to remove the exemption for sidewalks along Interstates 35 and 10. We did not propose any changes. It is exactly as presented at the last meeting.
Very good. So this is just final reading after having passed on first reading. Council, any questions on this particular one? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve 17S43?
So moved.
Second.
I've got a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Gutierrez. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a
No,
vote.
Mr. Mayor, that
Yes,
was
sir.
actually Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Thompson, I'm staying corrected. I have a motion from Mr. Thompson, a second from Mr. Gutierrez. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 I have 6 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. Next item that we have is item number 11. Thank you, by the way. Item number 11, Resolution 17R91, a resolution by the City Council authorizing a 4th amendment to the interlocal agreement with the Alamo Area Council of Governments, or ACOG, to provide funding of $28,872 for transit services in the City of Schertz.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Mr. James.
For folks in the audience, the city contracts with ACOG to provide the ART transportation service. It's an on-call, on-demand service for our residents. We have an agreement with ACOG, as do some of the other surrounding cities you see listed in the attachments, Cibolo, New Braunfels, Seguin, et cetera. We contract with them. They contract with VIA, who effectively receives a federal transportation grant for urbanized areas. So it requires cities who participate to kick in matching funds for that program. One of the issues is I will be honest, and this has come up before, it's a fairly expensive program. The rides are not inexpensive. They're about $22.50 per ride. I will say that keep in mind one of the issues here is often the folks who are riding have limited mobility or ability to get around and need a fair amount of assistance. Typically, when we bring this forward to council, it's a reminder to kind of go back, talk to TSAC about it, maybe do an update with VIA on kind of our future mass transit needs. And we do that periodically. Again, we've had the VIA folks come speak, I think, before you as well. We also talk with the ACOG folks. At this point, we don't think there's a need to expand the service. We don't think our population yet warrants a deviated fixed route or a fixed route like you may see in New Braunfels or Seguin. So I will say, while we've looked at what other communities do, most cities don't sort of there are some nonprofits that do some more creative things to try to bring the cost down with ride sharing, Uber and Lyft and things like that. But again, one of the concerns here is these are often folks that have limited ability to get a ride on their own and may need some special assistance to get to and from where they need to be. So again, staff is recommending approval. The amount contributed by the city is the same as the past year.
Mr. Edwards?
I do have one question. How many rides are we actually, do we know the count?
We do. They've got in the report, the ride count for City of Schertz is approximately 1,832.
You know, we do the right thing because it's simply the right thing to do. There are those that need help, and Mr. Mayor, I take a point of pride and privilege of asking for approval of 17R91.
Second. I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Davis. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item number 13, Resolution 17R93, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, scheduling a public hearing to consider adoption of land use assumptions and capital improvements plan and a capital improvements plan under which an impact fee may be imposed for roadways within the city, directing the city secretary to publish notice of said public hearing and other matters in connection therewith. Good evening. How are you, Ms. Woodley?
I am well, thank you, Mayor.
Very good.
Council, Mr. Kessel. With the potential adoption of an impact fee ordinance for funding roadway construction, Chapter 395 of the local government code sets forth some very specific procedural things that we have to follow in order to adopt such an ordinance. And one of those is that there has to be a public hearing to adopt the land use assumptions and the capital improvement plan that are to be used as the basis for calculation of the highest possible fee that could be charged. As in setting that public hearing, it is actually required that you make a resolution to have the public hearing on a particular date. And in conjunction with that, we must publish notice at least 30 days in advance of that public hearing. So what we're asking this evening is for you to pass this resolution setting the date for the public hearing of November 28th, and we will publish notice in the Express News on Friday, which is the 27th of October, so that's more than 30 days in advance of the public hearing. In your packets, we also did provide the draft copies of the land use assumptions and the capital improvement plan. The public hearing will be, they'll be the subject of that public hearing so that you could sort of get a jump start on it and have a look at those in plenty of time. And they'll also be made available on our website for the public to review a month in advance of the hearing.
Very good. And this is ministerial, and we're required to do this by state law.
Yes.
The wisdom of our legislature. Council, any questions?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve Resolution 17R93.
Second. I have a motion for Mr. Edwards, a second for Mr. Thompson. Mr. Crawford?
I'm correct in assuming that since we're only doing a public hearing, we don't need to discuss anything. We can save it till the public hearing.
That's correct. If you had questions, we
Oh, no, I can wait. It's not a problem. I just want to make sure that I was playing by the rules. Thank you.
Very good. Anyone else? If not, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no nays. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item we have on the agenda this evening is item number 14, Resolution 17R94, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, increasing the budget expenditures for the contract with Capital Excavation Company relating to the reconstruction of Schertz Parkway from Maskey Road to Live Oak Road. Evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Please bear with me while I get this going.
However, that's a great suggestion.
I apologize. I'm still the new guy.
It's all good. Take your time.
Okay. Good evening. I'm here to talk about the Schertz Parkway reconstruction project. This is our project area. We're reconstructing the main lanes of Schertz Parkway and a short section doing some widening and some improvements on Live Oak. When we started the project, when the project was designed, it relied upon as-built information, and this is a picture of what the as-constructed information contained, showing that the existing curb and gutter, both or the medians as well as the exterior curb, was 12 inches tall, or a little over 12 inches tall, 12 and a half inches tall, and had an embedment depth of about 5.5 inches. So the project was designed from this basis. Unfortunately, as we started to head into construction, and our contractor went out and did some poking around, part of their normal due diligence before they start excavating, they found that the actual conditions are not that. The actual conditions show we only have about a 2.5 inch embedment depth on the curb, which meant the curb isn't as tall as what was originally believed, and that poses some problems to the project potentially. So when they discovered this at one point, the first thing we did was we said, well, maybe this is a fluke, because you do have variations during the course of construction. So we went and we selected some random locations throughout the project area, dug down, and unfortunately basically found the same thing at all but one location. So having 5+ inches of embedment depth was not the norm. That was the rare occurrence, unfortunately. Here's a picture of kind of a typical section of curb after we've done the excavation down to the subgrade elevation. In other words, we've dug down as far as we're going to do for the reconstruction project. If we zoom in on that section of curb, the red line on there represents what the top surface of the pavement actually was. As you can see, that's a very narrow band of concrete that's physically down in the ground or below the surface that we all see and ultimately drive on. Here's some examples of some of the variations within the project. The location where we got an embedment depth close to what we anticipated based on the as constructed was kind of in this area here, where this is a real anomaly in that I don't know why or how a void or something got created to where that curb got poured that thick at that one short location. But you can see during normal variation that excuse me, also had some locations where underneath the curb, the base layer thickness varied greatly. What does this mean to the project? Well, unfortunately, it means that there could be a stability issue with the existing curb. We can't dowel the curb into the new concrete pavement like was originally designed because there's just not enough depth there to do that. You have to have at least 2 inches of cover around any piece of reinforcing steel in reinforced concrete. That means all sides of that reinforcing steel. If we only have 2.5 inches in the ground, even a relatively small piece of reinforcing steel, a number 4 bar, which is fairly small, 1/2 inch, you don't have the cover. So that could cause problems with the steel rusting. In concrete, it's called carbonation. When we talk carbonation, normally you think of sodas, but unfortunately it means something else in concrete. And what happens is the steel starts to rust, and when it starts to rust, it expands. And the same thing happens to your concrete that happens if you put a bottle of water in the freezer and the water freezes. It breaks. It starts to spall it off. The other issue with not being able to dowel is that we no longer have a mechanical bond for the curb to the concrete. And that's a bad thing sometimes too. The potential ramifications of not being able to dowel is the curb can shift or fall, tip over during construction or after construction, particularly in the area where we're planning to rebuild the walking path on the east side of the road. We're going to have heavy equipment, particularly vibratory compaction equipment, right behind that curb, and without that anchor mechanism to the new concrete pavement, that could easily cause that curb to tip over. We also have a potential for water intrusion along the curb pavement interface because they're no longer locked together. So you don't necessarily have something close to a watertight seal. That can cause a problem long term because that introduces water into the materials underneath the pavement, which is a primary cause of a lot of roadway failures. Unfortunately, it's not all negative. There are some positives in this situation. As we started doing construction and started going out and setting survey control, the contractor did, we came to the conclusion that there's only a few select areas where there's evidence of movement in the curb or evidence of instability with that curb. And these initial excavation efforts haven't really caused the curb to shift. I can tell you I had my fingers, toes, and eyes crossed the whole time when this started because the worst fear was once we started milling everything out or excavating out, the curbs could just slough off and fall into the bottom of the excavation, which was the last thing any of us wanted to see. And the initial compaction efforts that we've done so far, part of the project now has all of the new base material in place. It's been compacted, tested, and passed, and we're ready to start pouring the concrete pavement. So that's all good. So there's still a possibility that this curb, or the vast majority of it, is going to remain stable and we're not going to have an issue. And we have some other options. Some of them are very low cost, fairly simple, to address the potential water intrusion problem, getting a good seal between that curb and the new concrete pavement, even though we're not able to dowel it. So our recommendation is to replace curb only when absolutely necessary. Preserve as much of the existing curb as possible. So that would be in areas where we don't have the 5.5-inch embedment depth and the curb is defective and are showing signs of instability. What we're asking tonight is basically preparing or planning for the worst case scenario, that being we have to replace all the curb and gutter in the project area. We have funding available from the Excess 2009 project that we could allocate to this project and increase the maximum allowable cost for this project by an additional $141,000, which is about what it would cost to replace all of the curb within the project area. Here's an example of some of the curb that we encountered that we do have to replace. This is next to an inlet, and if you look at this area right here, you can see how the end of that curb has settled significantly next to that. The top of that curb should be lined up with this point right here. So by removing that short section, we're putting that curb up back where it goes so we get our gutter capacity during rain events. And we're also, if we just followed the top of the curb at that location with our new pavement, we'd be building a dip or a bump in the pavement, and we don't want to do that either. This is an example of what I call just simply defective curb. This was up at the north end of the job, the little transition piece onto Maskey Road, this pavement section you see here where they're starting to dig. down is actually in Maskey Road and not in Schertz Parkway. Well, if you look at the curb there, the only thing that's really holding that curb into place is the jagged edges of all the fractures. It's like a bunch of puzzle pieces stuck together. It wouldn't take much to knock that curb down into the hole. So this is a section of curb that we've actually already removed, and this area that's represented by the hole here right now is actually the first location of concrete pavement that was poured earlier this week. Here's kind of the synopsis of where we are with the project right now. Is we've already begun construction. We've done a lot of work on the southbound lanes of Schertz Parkway, and we actually had our first concrete pour on Monday. And that was that piece on Schertz Parkway. And what that did is it set up for them to start pouring the main line runs on Schertz Parkway, which the first concrete pour for that will be tomorrow morning. So I'll be out there watching concrete trucks pull in and dump stuff on the ground first thing tomorrow morning. Our estimated total project completion date is April 8th. That's based on the maximum contract days allowable in the contract. They're moving along pretty good. They're trying to ramp up their production. And if weather holds and everything goes smoothly, we might be able to beat that date a little bit. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Very good, counsel. Mr. Edwards?
So you are saying in your brief here that this money may not be needed, but just in case, just as a contingency?
Yes, what we're trying to do by planning for the worst case scenario is if something happens as we continue construction, we don't have to hold up the contractor and come before you and ask for money then. We're setting up everything so if we have to use it, it's there, it's available, so we can make that decision on the fly and keep the project moving and not cause any delays.
Well, thank you guys for the work you're doing on this, and I got to tell you, better you than me. You guys are doing a great job. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Crawford?
Sir, y'all have already excavated the southbound lane, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you should have a pretty good idea what the curb looks like. Is that correct or not correct?
We have a good idea what the southbound side.
Yes, sir. Not the other side, not the northbound side, because you haven't done anything on that.
Mhm.
So do you have an estimate on how bad or how good the south side is?
Overall, it's good. The curb is holding in place. We have a few sections that we've identified that are going to be removed and replaced, some of them that I showed the pictures of. There's a few other small sections that I didn't have pictures of that are going to be replaced, but the vast majority of the curb, for now, still appears stable, and we're hopeful it can still be salvaged.
Are you, maybe I didn't ask my question correctly. Are you telling me that you have the 5.5 inches above and on the curb, and then 5.5 inches down, and the total of 11 or 12 inches, whatever it is, for the whole thing, all the way around?
No,
except
sir.
in some places?
We only have very few locations where we have the 5.5 inches of embedment depth where we could dowel the curb.
And you're going to dowel everything, right? I mean, you wanted to if the curb were all set like it was supposed to have been done originally.
We would dowel everything if it was. What the way the project's proceeding right now is we're proceeding with construction of the new pavement without doweling into the existing curb because we do not have the embedment depth. And as long as the curb is stable and remains stable, we can do that and still have a viable project at the end. And that's how we're proceeding.
So you're saying you won't dowel everything?
No, sir. The concrete pavement itself will have all the reinforcing steel it has, but it will not be doweled mechanically to the curb.
I thought that was kind of what you wanted to do, though.
It is what we would want to do, but we don't have the concrete depth there to do that.
So if you don't have the depth, you're going to replace it so you can dowel it, or what?
No, sir. If the curb is stable, we have evidence that the curb is stable. It's stayed largely in place for the most part, with some exceptions throughout the project area ever since it was first built. So the thought process was, if we can go ahead and build the project and not have to dowel it, and it still will remain stable. We will just want to worry about the next piece is, how do we seal up that interface between the curb and the pavement. We have some options that we're exploring to do that. So the only curb that we're looking to replace is curb that is unstable, stuff that has started to move or has evidence to move that is also less than the 5.5 inches because we can't dowel it. Then we would look to replace that section or those sections of curb, but still leave the rest in place and pour the pavement per the original design, but just not dowel the curb to the pavement.
What you briefed us tonight is what the design engineer recommended we do? Because the way I read it last night and again this morning, that if you didn't like what you saw, you would replace all of the curb and have it all doweled into the street itself, and that would solve the water issue and the bonding issue to keep it straight and level and plumb and all those things, and we would just march on along.
We could certainly do that. The cost to do that would add another $141,000.
Which is what you're asking for.
The project. We're asking for that ability to do that if we have to.
And I'm not saying I'm not going to vote for it. I'm just asking the question. If I had my magic wand, I'd say replace it all, do it right the first time because it's only more expensive and takes more time the second time. But I'm not the engineer, and that's why I ask about the engineer, the design engineer. The question I really have is, if you know you're going to dowel the curb to the poured concrete like you would if you're putting two slabs together, why wouldn't we go ahead and do it right if it's messed up to begin with? From the pictures I saw and you showed tonight, we've got a lot of variance there. And I wonder why the engineer didn't have that didn't have that looked at before we did the contract, so we would know and we could have asked for the 141 to begin with. I'm not going to disapprove this.
Okay.
I'm just questioning the processing of making the decision for something that's going to have a ton of traffic on it, no pun intended, and we're going to have a walking trail and a jogging trail alongside it. You pointed out that you're going to have equipment that may mess up the curb. If we mess up the curb down the road here in the next 4 to 6 months, we've got another big problem of money to spend.
Okay. When this issue was discovered, we did consult with the design engineer, and we looked at 4 main options to address the situation, and we looked at combinations of those options. The option that the design engineer actually recommended was to look at preserving as much of the curb as the existing curb as we possibly could. It saves the project money, and the thought process behind that was just what I described, in that the curb appears to be stable. It's been stable ever since it was built, so if we don't need to replace it and we can live without the doweling, which there's evidence that we could potentially do that should be our first goal to try to do. The other recommendation was, because of the vibratory equipment and everything that will be utilized to build the pathway, that the recommendation is to kind of deem that as being unstable now, even though we haven't done all the excavation, and plan and prepare to replace all of that curb, that one side, that exterior curb along that side, so there is no question, and we'll get the proper depth there. We'll be able to dowel that side, so there won't be an issue with constructing the path and along that side.
I thank you for your response and answers. I will vote to approve this, but I wish we were doing everything doweled so that we would have particularly great certainty that it would stay put together based on all the stuff that can go around on either side of it, the traffic on the street or the equipment on the other side on the other side of the curb. So, but thank you for your answers.
You're very welcome, sir.
So I'm gonna agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Crawford's assessment. I would much rather spend the $141,000 and do this right the first time than to try to find a way to say, well, we don't need to spend this. If we do it this way, we can get there. If we can spend the $141 and do the job at a stronger position than a workaround, then I think we should spend that money.
Certainly, as I understand it, Mayor, there is no negative to simply removing all of the curb, doing it to depth and down it, other than cost. So to be perfectly honest, if council says, let's remove the curb, go ahead and adjust the contract, we'll certainly be happy to do that. So appreciate council's perspective. You know, from a staff perspective, we frankly try to balance what's the benefit, what's the cost, what are the other community needs, what are the opportunity costs. But certainly, if council were to say, heard the explanation, understand that, we're going to spend, you know, $1 million on it, spend another 150 and do it, we could certainly do that.
Yeah, you know, just it's moisture and water, essentially, that caused this failure in this particular section, is it not? I mean, that's really a big part of it.
So I will say this, Mayor, again, it's been sort of an interesting process. Again, as John had said, it's not simply ignore the issue of moisture with it not being down. The issue was there are alternate ways to deal with the moisture issue that weren't in place before. The other, curiously enough, is we go back to the PowerPoint presentation, a few slides. I think it's a couple of things are telling with regard to it. Particularly when we get up in this slide, look at the variation, not just in the curve depth, but in everything below it. So to be perfectly honest, one of the reasons we didn't come and say, hey, we have a contingency built in of $90,000 already, need another 50, let's take it, is we just started the project 3 weeks ago, and this is what we discovered, and that doesn't fill us with confidence that we won't necessarily find something else, which is why we came this way. So again, to be clear, if council's direction is, if I'm spending $1 million, just go ahead and take it out, spend the 150 from now on, we're happy to do that. Again, if we were not comfortable with the recommendation of doing something else, we wouldn't recommend it. We'd walk up and go, yeah, you need to do it. Sorry, that's it. It certainly is your call balancing that going forward. But what we try not to do are overbuild things or spend money unnecessarily to increase the cost, because we certainly have a lot of other need in the community going forward. But I can appreciate council's perspective with that. The other, I'll say, certainly the comment in terms of when we find things, frankly, the same thing goes into that process. We could spend a lot of money up front on projects to say, let's make sure we really reduce the likelihood of getting surprised. But frankly, we think at the end of the day, we would waste a lot of money as opposed to establishing a certain tolerance for things that are going to catch us off guard. But again, what I would say is now that we've done this section of Schertz Parkway, when we do another section, we're going to make some assumptions that things aren't right, but if there's no evidence that things weren't constructed right, we're not going to assume that going forward, because again, we tend to waste a lot more money on design costs. So you're correct, so I can appreciate that. It's a balancing act, and we try to find that balance. Mainly the same way we don't come in and inflate the cost we want of a project, so that we can say, well, we never come in over a project. Well, it's because we inflated it and held it when we wasted a bunch of money.
I'm not an engineer, so I could walk my statement back a little bit if someone said to me, the alternative methods we're looking at are equal in long-term stability and success to spending the $141,000. If they are equal, man, you've got a different reaction from me. If they aren't equal, and if the doweling is the proper standard, then we should spend the money, I mean, an extra 10% on the proper standard.
Certainly, it's council's direction. Again.
I mean, are workarounds to what we intended to do originally equal in strength and longevity and all other things to what's being suggested without spending $141,000? And if you can't answer that because it's not a fair engineering question, I'll understand, because I'm ignorant when it comes to this.
I'm going to have to hedge my answer just slightly in that I wouldn't say that they're equal. I would say at best they are comparable. Obviously, the ideal, I'm going to say the Cadillac, is being able to dowel that curve to the new pavement.
Given that statement,
But we could live with the Chevy, potentially.
Yeah, but this is probably one of the most driven roads in the city. This is undoubted. I mean, I have people that don't live in Schertz that traverse this road and tell me what a beautiful drive it is, and then just the sheer volume of people that drive this. I don't want to rebuild this in 10 years. I want to be way, way out of elected office before this gets looked at again. I think Mr. Crawford's spot on. If the right thing to do is to take bond money that we already have and get this done the right way the first time, let's do it. Mr. Edwards? And I'll come right over.
Is there a possibility of you coming back, even if we approve this and say do it right the first time? By the way, welcome to the city of Schertz, and we do it right the first time. Yeah. So, but is there a possibility of you coming back to us and saying, we got a little bit deeper into this project, and not only is it $141,000 now, but now we need a couple of hundred more, right?
Be real blunt. I mean, again, when approached by the issue, the fact that we're a few weeks into construction and we found this does not fill me with confidence that we won't find something else. To be blunt, we just had a conversation today about the depth of a couple of lines that we feel are for irrigation and another of the power lines for the pole. So again, we have run across things beyond this that are not what they should be, and I can guarantee we'll run across more. Again, that's why we came and said, give me another 140 as opposed to just give me another 60. So let me say this. I can certainly appreciate Councilor's perspective, and the direction is, hey, if we're going to do it and spend $1 million, let's get out and do it right. We're not opposed to that. Again, our challenge is at the same time we're doing this, we are working up the long-awaited PCI, and part of the struggle is we have a lot of roads out there that we need to get to. And to be blunt, when I get on the other side of 35, we will likely not assume that was built per plan as well, and those costs may exceed what the consultant estimated because he assumed it was built per typical standards and specs. So again, don't disagree with you. The only challenge we have is this is not going to be the first of these things we're going to face.
So since Mr. Crawford brought this up, Mr. Crawford, would you like to make a motion?
Hold on.
I'd like to.
Hold on. Mr. Davis asked to be recognized next, and then I'll come straight back to Mr. Crawford. Mr. Davis.
I've got a couple of questions. First of all, a comment to my esteemed colleague, Mr. Edwards. Apparently, we don't do it right the first time because the as-built that are on file are not what we're looking at here. So a couple quick questions. The mayor brought up a good point. I mean, when we talk about doweling the curb, we're talking about doweling the curb, the existing concrete curb, into what we're putting in as a concrete roadway.
Yes, sir.
There was no doweling the first time because we had asphalt.
Correct.
But the curbing on that side that we're working on now, for the most part, appears stable. There are some problem areas. But the mayor mentioned the problems with the roadway. We didn't have a problem with the curb, we had a problem with the roadway. Is it fair to say that the problem with the roadway was more due to the sub work under the asphalt? I mean, I'm looking at that bottom picture there, and that doesn't look like we have even a uniform sub base under the road, which again, I'm an old cop. I'm not an engineer or a construction guy, but it would seem to me that a poor subsurface was probably more the predominant reason why we had road surface failure versus anything with the curb. Now,
Talk about the other section too that we talked about.
now, before I go into that, I understand on the other side where it's probably important to look at the curbing. And again, I'm not against replacing all the curbing if that's the right thing to do. But on the other side of the street, the curbing issue is because we have a wider walkway that goes from the inside edge all the way out to the road and meets up with the curb versus the side we're looking at now, which is a standalone curb and a fill buffer before you get to the sidewalk.
And we're not touching the sidewalk on this
We're not touching the sidewalk on this side, it's on the other side. So my question would be, if you have alternative solutions for here, worst case is if the curb had a problem later, because we're putting in a new concrete roadway surface with a new sub base underneath it, correct?
Yes.
We're putting in all new sub base, and then we're pouring a concrete surface, road surface. To me, the worst case scenario other than a section of sidewalk or a section of curbing that is already shifted or is already failed, the worst case scenario would be in the future, if a section of curb shifted, you could replace that section of curbing and you could dowel it when you replace the curbing because you already have your road surface, correct?
That is correct. You could,
So, I mean, so at worst case is on this side here, if that upper picture, if you left that curb in place and 5 years from now or 10 years from now, that curb failed or shifted, you could still at that point dowel into the road surface and pour the new curb, and then it would in fact be doweled into the road surface at that point.
yes, sir.
Okay.
You could do that. Constructability-wise, it might be slightly more difficult to do it after the fact than it would be to do it in conjunction with the project. With answer to your question in terms of the failures in the roadway, I can't definitively place the blame on any one thing. I think there's probably a combination of things going on here that caused the failure that you saw on the surface of the roadway. Part of the failure could be attributed to the asphalt thickness is about 2.5 inches thick. That's the only seal you had against that concrete. You didn't have anything down below it, so you had a greater potential for water to get in there. And once water gets in there, even if you have adequate base and a properly prepped subgrade, you're going to have failures in your surface paving. There's one section up near Maskey Road in the turn lane where we built the temporary transition for traffic control. That when we went up there to do that, it called for us to take out just a small area. Well, if I take out this small area, I've got a sinkhole right next to it. We've got equipment and paving right there. It made sense to address that. Well, as we went to address that, when we started pulling out that asphalt, we discovered why that was failing. Not because it didn't have base underneath it. The asphalt thickness over most of that area was just under an inch thick. 3/4 of an inch, 3/4 to just under an inch. The thickness we found in that turn lane was about 1.25 inches. You didn't have the structural capacity. And it looked fine and it held up fine until the new subdivision went in and you started getting more traffic on it, and then it started to fail. So is that a possibility that we had sections of pavement that weren't as thick as it should have been? And the volume of traffic that utilizes Schertz Parkway could cause that to fail. Because as we did the milling, as we did the excavation underneath the pavement, there was a pretty good layer of base underneath it. And the base was actually good base. I mean, we're reusing that, as a matter of fact, for the new base that's going underneath our new concrete pavement section. We're taking, when the contractor removed it, they chose to use a milling machine to remove everything. So they removed everything in basically 2 passes. And so the first pass is the pulverized asphalt surface, whatever thickness that was, and the base material underneath it that was in good shape and is good material. That's all now blended together. We got a new proctor on that material, and that is being used as our new base. It's stronger than just a regular crushed base material because of the asphalt particles in it will help bind it together and give it more stability. So that's why we did that change to the project. So I think there's a multitude of factors involved there that led to the failures. I can't definitively point to one or the other in this. Based on some of the feedback from earlier in the project, from some residents and whatnot, I've taken a closer look at the next piece of Schertz Parkway from Maskey Road to Woodlawn and been asked to evaluate that. Why are we seeing failures in that area? Why is it starting to look like the area that we're working on now? Do we need to consider extending this concrete pavement section further to the north? In reviewing the PCI data for that section, the PCI score is very high. But that was a snapshot in time when that data was collected. And if you look at the roadway now, I'm not sure that would score that high if you evaluated all the distresses that you see in that roadway now. So I have to ask the question, why is this happening? Why is it happening fairly quickly compared to when the PCI data was done? Knowing what we know about the section south of there and looking at the patterns, because as you drive that, you can see a definite difference in the asphalt or in the surface appearance. If you look at the two exterior lanes right next to the exterior curb lines versus the two lanes in the center, the bad stuff is predominantly happening in these two exterior lanes. So if I apply the same section that we encountered, that we're working on now, to that area and say we only have 2.5 inches of embedment depth on that curb, and we only have a couple inches, a little over a couple inches of asphalt up against that curb, and water's getting in there, that's where your failures are going to start. They're going to start on that outer edge, particularly in that outer wheel path, and work towards the center. And that's kind of a pattern we're seeing. But I don't know for sure. I wish I was like Superman and had x-ray vision so I could go out there and say, yeah, that's it. All we need to do is address this, and we can take care of it. So to find out what really is going on, that's an area where we're going to look at retaining the services of a testing firm, a geotechnical firm, to go out and do some cores. Tell us what we've got out there, what's underneath, get a better understanding of what's going on so we can make a decision. If we continue marching northward with our road reconstruction effort, do we have to do a concrete section there, or can we get by with something else? You know, what's causing the failures? That's the keys. We have to know what we've got to start with and try to pinpoint what's causing those failures.
Very good. Mr. Crawford?
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. If your comment in mind about spending the money to do it correctly with respect to all the bonding issues and the fact it's a busy highway, a busy street, busy parkway, all those kind of things in place, then we need to restate what our resolution is.
Yeah, and we can do that actually in the form of a motion. The motion can be that rather than setting a not to exceed, we can still actually set a not to exceed and say do the work.
Right.
It can really be that.
Do we need to
simple.
get the council on board with that program before we do a motion to approve this, or
Yeah, and I probably need to make sure I recognize everybody else that has
Yes.
a question or comment. Dr. Kaiser.
A quick question. I just want to make sure I understand this. So let's say we go ahead and say, add the 141,000, do the work. How does that affect then when something else comes up? Have we used all of the contingency funding?
No, ma'am.
Or will we still have enough to cover other things that may come up?
We still have $90,000 worth of contingency that was part of the original contingency when the contract was awarded.
And do you think that'll be enough?
I hope so.
Again, as I mentioned, we just talked today about some lines that we know will have to tap into that contingency to lower, for example. So we'll start eating away at that contingency. As John said, our hope is this was sort of the worst problem and a couple things we're finding. But again, you really do just never know, because frankly, it's not cost effective to spend all the money to tear the thing out and find out what you've got. You just make a guess.
Right.
Yeah, Mr. Edwards.
You know, I know it feels like we're beating you up, and I know you don't have x-ray vision, but I also want you to know that we're committed. Schertz Parkway has been a problem for quite some time. I can tell you, I think this will be our third attempt. Am I correct? This is hopefully it'll be our final.
We've done some repair work, but it was one construction project.
So I just want you to be aware that, please, if you find something else, come back to us, because it's that important for us. It really is. This has been a spot of contention for many of our citizens, and they have brought it up over and over again. But I will say, we want you to give us your the good old college try, as they say. Give us the concrete information, and if we have to go back and revisit it again, we just have to go back and revisit it again.
Yeah.
And maybe to say this, Councilman, I think, our goal is to help you make an informed decision.
Correct.
And so it's to give you all the information, walk you through, and frankly, maybe like Dan's presentation, it isn't always easy when you're having to balance things and weigh things. And again, part of what I think our engineering department has stepped up to do, both John and Scott and Cecilia and Larry and Kathy and folks are, again, the updates that we're getting and that they're sending out are much more thorough to make sure that all levels of staff fully understand that the information we're communicating to the public to help them understand what's going on is a higher. So we're trying to make more informed decisions so that we don't either do things subpar or frankly go to an extreme and waste funds that are needed somewhere else. And that's a balancing act. So I certainly can appreciate the consideration. Didn't feel like we got beat up. If the direction is no, let's err on the side of caution, rip it out. Happy to do that. Again, wanted you to feel like we didn't feel like that was necessary, that we would make those judgment calls knowing there were other ways to deal with water infiltration.
And to Mr. Edwards' point, this is the way we want to do. This is the way we want to conduct business. We want to hear from you. We want your opinions. That's why we decided to have an in-house engineering team, which we didn't have in the past. I think this is evidence of why we want to spend the money to have an in-house engineering team, so you can come to us and say, we got choices, here's the facts, tell me how you want us to proceed. This is what we anticipated and hoped for when we brought forth an in-house engineering team. So I'm going to stop running my mouth, as hard as it is for me to do that, and ask Mr. Crawford if he would like to make the motion on this thing. Yeah, so Mr. Crawford will come right back to you. Mr. Thompson?
This is a non-engineering person asking the question, so again, please put up with me. On the opposite side of Schertz Parkway that has not yet been torn up, we have the street, we have the curb. As Mr. Davis indicated, we have the solid concrete going, or asphalt going all the way to the edge. The side where we're having apparently some curbing issues, we have the curb, we have a strip of grass, then we have the concrete. Would it be more efficient? Would it be easier? Would it be better in the long run if we got rid of the grass on that side and just made it a solid concrete all the way to the sidewalk?
You're putting me in a difficult situation here. I do not like to make a recommendation that goes against the city's design standards that they have on the books. But if you will indulge me, see, he's distancing himself from.
So before we indulge you, I'm going to, because I have a fear in the back of my mind that shortly our city attorney is going to say, now the resolution is about approving $141,000 and a total not to exceed, and we're moving into other areas and what ifs and things. So I think we should take that up in a separate conversation about that one. Except
if work is being done now, if it is deemed better to continue to pour over to the sidewalk, we're going to have to go back and do. I'm just asking for that stretch of from Live Oak to Schertz Parkway. That's just.
And I think that the best decision for us in light of the Open Meetings Act as the chair is to say we should, because that would be an additional expenditure and beyond the $141,000 that we're talking about here, that would be best if we put that on our very next meeting and have the engineering team come back and brief us on that.
Well, question. I mean,
hold on. Mr. Santee, would you send me another direction and say go ahead and talk about it, or should we? As the chair, I have my own opinion. I don't want to overstep to either direction.
Right, and I guess my struggle was understanding exactly what the question was with regard to what the project is that we're discussing. I mean, I like this presentation. I mean, I just didn't make the connection to know well enough if we were going too far beyond.
I think if I may, Dan can certainly disagree. I think the question you're getting to is if the direction per the side we're talking about is tear out the curb on the side that's presently torn up, southbound section. Your question is, does it make sense to go a foot beyond the curb and tie in to take out the grass median and essentially extend the sidewalk. And my assumption is there'd be two elements to that. So to me, it's a legitimate question associated with the project, and we're talking about expanding the scope of the project with all due deference. To me, it seems within the bounds. But I think the answer you would get has to do with what does that do with regard to some of the issues we have with stability of the road. And then the other is, frankly, the capacity of the sidewalk, given the volume of pedestrians that we might expect there, just having the extra width increase.
So one of the affirmative defenses to prosecution under the Open Meetings Act is that if our attorney has said that in his opinion it's okay for us to talk about it, we're off the hook.
Yeah, I do think it's related to what they're discussing, because it's just a different design of the curb that we're talking about potentially replacing.
Great. Given that, now that he said that, I feel safe. Please proceed.
My experience with these narrow landscape buffer areas is they're more headache than what they're worth. A 2-foot minimum, which is kind of what we've got out there. If you look at the upper picture, you can see the condition of that right now. And that's how they often look. It doesn't really buy you much. Now, from a construction standpoint, from a project standpoint, the concrete sidewalk over there doesn't pose the same issue potentially that the asphalt multi-use pathway does. Because we could leave that sidewalk, leave the planting strip or whatever you want to call it in place now, and when that sidewalk is due for replacement on its normal cycle, or if there's a desire for additional capacity to have additional width over there to, in essence, create another multi-use pathway on that side, you could simply widen that out and address that at that time. If you did concrete, you don't have the heavy equipment typically there. You don't have all the vibration that you do there, or the asphalt that we're doing on the other side. So I don't think, I would not anticipate or seeing an issue with curb stability going back later and adding additional concrete width to that sidewalk on that side.
Mr. Larson.
Sorry, this question is just a restatement of another one because I want to make sure I understand before I vote. John, in your professional opinion, following the initial recommendation of only replacing as needed, does that expose the roadway to additional risks of deterioration that we wouldn't necessarily have if we redid all the curbs for the $141,000?
Potentially, yes. There are things we can do to minimize that potential. The key being is how do we seal that interface without having the dowel done? And there's a couple ways we can do that. One way is once the job is complete, once the new pavement is done, we go along that edge and basically crack seal that entire edge with the same type of material that we would seal the joints up with, in the concrete itself. Similar material is what's used to seal up cracks on our asphalt roadways. Helps stop water intrusion. That is one option that we're considering. The problem, or not the problem, it requires you to monitor that just like any of the other joint sealant material, and if it starts to wear or you start to see a crack propagating through it, you have to go back out and re-crack seal it. So you have to stay up on it, just like we would on an asphalt road. Another option that we're looking at that actually came from our contractor, it's a product that they used on a different job, and it was actually one that I was not intimately familiar with. It's a newer product. It's a two-part epoxy product that's designed to bond new concrete to old concrete, or new concrete to steel and other materials. And it's very easy to apply. You basically mix it up, brush it on the curb right before you pour the new concrete, and it does two things. It does provide some bonding of that curb to the new concrete. It's not going to provide the strength that dowling will, but it does provide a little bit of bonding. But the bigger issue with that is it does create a watertight seal. And so that's something that we're waiting on the cost information from our contractor right now to be able to add that throughout the rest of the project. That would be part of this chipping away at the $90,000 contingency that we originally had in the project to pursue that. Since we don't have all those pieces, the contractor on his own is using a similar type product that he has on hand for this first board that he's planning to do tomorrow. So we're going to have something to seal that edge up, assuming that we don't replace the curb. Now, if you tell me we want you to replace all the curb, then I will go to him tomorrow and say, is this going to change anything? Are you going to delay your concrete pour? Or he could choose to pour the pavement and replace the curb or the pavement, but either way, we can make that.
Thank you. And then my second clarification question is, this $141,000 assumes we have the same problem on the northbound construction site as well? Okay, so that covers both sides of curbs. Okay.
It would cover replacement of all of the curb and gutter within the project area, the outer curbs, the exterior curbs, as well as both sides of the median.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Davis.
One last question. If we said take the 141 and replace all the curbing and guttering in the project location, and that would be pouring a new curb that's the 12.5 inches?
Yes, sir.
That would be doweled into the new concrete surface?
Yes, sir.
Wouldn't you still have to do some kind of sealing like you talked about with epoxy, or some other kind of sealing between a new 12-inch curb that's doweled? Because the new curbing is not poured with the roadway as an integral unit. You have a curbing that is drilled and then doweled, so the dowel comes out, the metal rod comes out, and is sticking out when they pour the new road surface, which would allow that to be pinned to the road surface. But you still have a gap or a seam between the curbing and the road surface that ultimately has to be sealed, correct?
There are two ways, if we chose to replace all of the curb and gutter, there are two ways that the contractor could do it. And he gave us two options of how he would elect to proceed. One of them would be he would pour the pavement and the curbing monolithically. So it'd all be one piece. You extend your reinforcing steel up into the curb section so you wouldn't have a joint there. The other way is kind of what I'll call a partial monolithic pour, in that you pour the concrete pavement and you have rebar sticking up out of it, and then you pour just this vertical section on the curb on top of that. So you don't have the pathway then for the water to get down. But the key is the doweling. I mean, even if, say this curb was 5.5 inches deep and we weren't going to replace it, we were just going to pour new concrete to it. The fact that it's doweled together, that doweling is what holds it tight and keeps that seal. Plus you have the 5.5 inches of stuff butting up to other stuff as opposed to the 2.5. So you get the seal two ways from that. But in answer to your question, if we replaced all the curb and gutter, there's a chance it would be poured all monolithically, which would mean all one unit, or the top vertical part that you would see would be added afterwards. But then you have more of a horizontal joint that's doweled together as opposed to that vertical joint that allows water to go down into the subgrade.
Anyone else? If you would like.
Sir, if I can get the wording right. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a recommendation. We approve resolution number 17R94 with the $141,000 addition to the total for $1,168,685 to include the work to replace the curbing on all four sides of the two streets.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Crawford, a second from Mr. Edwards. Any other comments or questions from council?
I'd like to just say, please don't hesitate to come back to us if we need to, if you get deeper into that project.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And my compliments to council. If you approve this, I think it's a strong, correct decision. based on all the things that we've seen that we've tried to do differently in the past. With that, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes and no nays. Motion carries. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And as Mr. Edwards said, please come back to us and tell us what you see, what you think. That's why one of the biggest reasons you all are here, and great stuff on this one. Excellent.
My comment.
Please do.
I would like to echo what Mr. James said earlier. I do not feel that you're beating up on me at all. In fact, I wish all of my experiences addressing a city council over the course of my career was as easy as this and welcoming as this. Thank you.
Welcome to Schertz.
Thank you.
All right. Next item we have is item number 15, which is Ordinance 17A44, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz confirming and approving a boundary agreement establishing the municipal boundary between the City of Schertz and the City of Cibolo and providing an effective date.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Mr. Kessel, Mr. Santee. The item that you have before you is a ordinance to adjust our city limit boundaries between the City of Schertz and City of Cibolo around the homestead development. You may remember this from July 11th of this year, where we previously heard it. Some of the background history on this, and I'll go a little bit into the agreement as well. The original proposal, so this is the kind of master planned area of Homestead. It's changed a little bit, but the boundaries are all the same with this black line representing the existing city limit. Schertz is this front section here, and Cibolo is this back portion. Homestead stretches from I-35 all the way back to Green Valley Road. If you'll have driven by this or through it as well, these first kind of units right in here and this unit here have been constructed, as well as Homestead Parkway. As this development came in both Cibolo and in Schertz, both city staffs through the inception of it in 2013, 2014 discussed as an eventual item to bring forward a boundary adjustment so that we have the city limit boundary follow this collector road that kind of divides it, so we have a cleaner city limit. This has a variety of benefits. It includes not dividing right-of-way down the center line, which can cause issues with maintenance, especially when that pothole is right in the middle of the road. Who fixes it? The cleaner way that we have found to handle these items is to divide up full sections of roadway and thus provide that responsibility to different cities. Makes it a lot cleaner for the cities to understand their responsibilities, and also residents who call in to understand who they actually need to be talking to have the road fixed or report that problem. So again, in July 11th of this year, the original proposal, and I've rotated this, so bear with me again. This leg here, as it goes further south, goes towards the Northcliffe subdivision and future extension of Country Club Boulevard. And as we go north here, we're going towards Schwab Road, and this is actually a future extension of Schwab in the intersection there. So all I've done is just turned it. So again, Northcliffe is going to be on your left here, and then Schwab's going to be over here on the right. And so the first proposal, the City of Schertz was proposed to take this section of roadway from the roundabout to Schwab Road, which also includes a townhome section, and the City of Cibolo would have the roundabout as well as the portion going towards Northcliffe. This item was originally passed on first reading by the Schertz City Council on July 11th. It was also heard at the same date by Cibolo City Council, who denied it. They had some concerns at the time regarding land transitions because the original proposal, much like the current proposal, had a lot of land coming into Schertz. As you can see here, this whole gray area is existing Cibolo. The council at the time had expressed some concerns about lots being built there and giving up land that's valuable, so on and so forth. They were later reassured, as it was presented to council originally also, that there's not a physical buildable lot shift here via the planned development district. It's all roadway, And then this area here is private park and drainage areas. So there's not any kind of buildable items. Since then, city staff from both cities has sat down, talked about it again, addressed some of the items that were brought up in concerns, and reevaluated the roadway sections. The current proposal is that City of Schertz would just take the opposite side going towards Northcliffe. The justification for this is that Country Club Boulevard, as most of you will know, dead ends currently. It is projected to continue on through, and then I believe ties all the way back into Dietz Road, maybe Dietz or Green Valley, as it keeps going back. And there is buildable land still in the City of Schertz, developable land back here. And so eventually that cross connection will make into Schertz as the master thoroughfare plan gets built out and as those lots get developed. And so it does make sense for us there. We also have the same connection on the other side. The City of Cibolo staff kind of made the comment that this section has more openings from the Cibolo portion of the residential traffic, and so in the immediate term, they will have a lot more traffic on it. We do have a townhome unit here. We don't quite know what that's going to look like. The developer hasn't lotted it out or laid it out, but it is significantly less than the amount of units that have openings onto that section. So city staff has evaluated this proposal. We're comfortable with it. Either side kind of works for us. Both have pros and cons to them.
All right, so
staff recommends approval as presented. So
I think I can't read some of this because it's too small for my eyes. The area that's in it's gray will do what?
The gray areas is coming into Schertz out of Cibolo.
Including on the other side of...
Including the other side as well.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Which
Council?
represents about 6.8 acres. And then the hashed areas are going out of Schertz into Cibolo, which is this area, and an area that you can barely even see, but if you look at the document, it's like a point... Bear with me for a second.
0.7139.
Yeah, 0.0029 acres, kind of right here on the corner. That's going out of Schertz into Cibolo. So
I have no objections. Questions, Council?
I have one question.
Mr. Edwards.
So there's no taxable value exchange here besides the park land?
So there's always taxable value via land.
Okay.
Every piece of property carries tax with it except for items that are exempt. The land that is being developed as planned lots, because in the city of Cibolo, this is under a agreement. They have a development agreement on this as well that locks in the lotting pattern and the number of lots, much like our planned developments do. And so this developer is stuck with the master plan that was originally approved with the zoning unless they come to city council and request for different zoning, at which point in time the city council will be able to look at that.
And we currently, our UDC is pretty stringent about our building codes and so forth. So in the future, I'm just wondering if we're going to have anyone come in from Cibolo saying, our homes were not built to a certain standard.
We always run that risk. It is something that the developer's aware of because they're building across subdivision lines. We have a number of subdivisions in the city that split those lines, especially some of the older subdivisions along 3009 have that same item.
Okay. Thank you.
Indeed. Mr. Thompson.
Move that we adopt ordinance number 17-8-44.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Thompson, a second from Mr. Crawford. Any other comments or questions from council? I do have a question. How quickly will we need to provide zoning to that area that's coming into the city after we bring it into the city? Because it's not part of our land now. It'll be brought in. It won't have a zoning designation unless that's part of what we're doing here.
Yeah, we'll run the zoning on it. It'll be the same as the existing PDD, and
It'll come back before council, or come back before planning and zoning and then council in the normal process?
Yep.
Very good. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Now it's number 16. Ordinance 17D45, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, providing that the Code of Ordinances of the City of Schertz, Texas be amended by revising Section 86-115 maximum limits generally on specific streets and providing an effective date and declaring an emergency.
Hello again.
Howdy.
So this is a little bit of deja vu. We were here about a month or so ago, and on behalf of TxDOT, asked you to pass an ordinance establishing the construction speed zone around the bridge construction at 1103 and 35. We sent them the executed ordinance. They said, well, thank you very much, but we made a mistake. It was supposed to be 45 miles per hour. We contacted them and said, well, couldn't we adopt something slower? And they said, no, that's not how it works at TxDOT. The speed limit, they actually do studies. This has something to do with the speed that a vehicle could hit the barricade type that they're using and not go airborne. In any case, they're very specific with the speed limit that is set. They will not allow us to go less than that. So we're revising the ordinance that was passed recently and setting the speed limit at 45 instead of 40 miles per hour.
TxDOT's a good partner. We probably ought to do it. Any comments or questions from council? Is there a motion to approve ordinance 17D45?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Edwards, a second from Mr. Gutierrez. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 7 ayes, no nays. The motion carries. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is a roll call vote confirmation. Ms. Brenda, we made this one all kind of convoluted, didn't we?
Yeah, but I think
Awesome.
I hope so. Consent agenda includes items 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 12. Motion was made by Councilmember Crawford, seconded by Councilmember Thompson. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Excuse me. Item number 3, ordinance number 17S40, final reading. Motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Davis. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, Council members Davis, Gutierrez, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Councilmember Larson was not present. That's the reason why he did not vote. Item number 7, ordinance number 17S43, final reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Thompson, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Council members Davis, Gutierrez, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. Motion passed. Again, Councilmember Larson was off the dais. That's why there's no vote. Item number 11, Resolution 17R91. Motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Davis. Councilmembers Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 13, resolution number 17R93. Motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Thompson. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 14, a motion was made by Councilmember Crawford to approve Resolution 17R94 to include work to replace the curbing on both sides. Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 15, ordinance number 17A44, first reading. Motion was made by Councilmember Thompson, seconded by Councilmember Crawford. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed. Item number 16, ordinance number 17D45 on first and final reading. Motion was made by Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards voted yes. Councilmembers Davis, Gutierrez, Larson, Thompson, Kaiser, Crawford voted yes. No one voted no. Motion passed.
Thank you, ma'am. The council does have a need to go into a closed session this evening, and City Council will meet in closed session under Section 551.087 of the Texas Government Code, deliberation regarding economic development and negotiations, closed meeting. And this governmental body is not required to conduct an open meeting to discuss or deliberate regarding commercial or financial information the governmental body has received from a business prospect the governmental body seeks to have locate, stay, or expand in or near the territory of the governmental body and with which the governmental body is conducting economic development negotiations, or to deliberate the offer of a financial or other incentive to a business prospect. This is with regard to Project E-033. Council will recess for a few minutes and then go into closed session and return as soon as we're able. Yes, absolutely. Okay, when I take how about that? All right, it's roughly 10 o'clock, and we're going to return to open session at this time. The next item that we have on the agenda is item 17A, taking any action based on discussions held in closed session under agenda item 17. I don't believe there's any action to take. Therefore, there's no need for a roll call vote confirmation. The next item on the agenda, we have requests and announcements. Any further announcements from the city manager this evening? He tells me there are not. Next item. I don't see it on the agenda. My apologies, and no big deal. But oh, I'm sorry. It's right here in front of me. Duh, I didn't turn the page. Request by the mayor and council members that items be placed on a future city council agenda. Anything that we don't have that we need to have, Mr. Thompson?
At a future time when the city is ready to present this more in the form of a workshop, I've had a number of residents in door knocking ask about speed bumps, speed humps. Be nice to have a workshop. How can a subdivision request these, or an HOA? How are they paid for? Their criteria to approve, and if we've got our HOA presidents beginning to meet at that point, potentially even in a special invitation to all HOA presidents to attend this meeting.
Yeah, and so let's do have a briefing on that. There's a lot of information that we can get from staff about broken fire apparatus and other things that are very interesting when you talk about speed bumps and such. So I think an overview for the council about speed bumps and when they make sense from an engineering perspective and when they don't, and what a process would be for
and speed humps and that.
Indeed, and what a process would be for a neighborhood to formally request via their HOA.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if this is actually something for the future agenda, but I'd like to make an attempt here. While we were at TML, we had an opportunity to visit with the company that did the interactive soccer wall. I was wondering if maybe Mr. Kessel could actually contact that company and invite them to possibly set up at our Festival of Angels.
So that'd be an interesting thing. And Mr. Kessel?
We'd be happy to reach out.
Very good. Mr. Crawford?
I forgot to ask about, Mr. Kessel sent me an email about the shredding program, and I just, Live Oak has theirs going on the 4th of November behind the fire station, if you want to go over there and use that. But if we can get something sorted out, that'd be nice to know. And I can visit with you about that next week, Mr. Kessel.
Okay, so you'll visit with Mr. Kessel about that one, and then Kessel will reach out to that company, and then a briefing for the council on speed bumps, speed humps, and all the fun that goes along with those. All right, any others? All right, hearing none, I'll move on to item number 20, announcements by the mayor and council members, and I'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Edwards.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to, I don't know if you guys know this, but Kuya is brother or uncle in the Philippines, and Ati is auntie or sister. So I just want to say thank you to Kuya Romy and Ati Laura Allison and Ati Janet for what they did for the Adobo Festival. Also, I want to thank Miss Blasik for what she did for Scenic Hills for our Meet the Candidate. That was a great turnout, great lunch, and for all those that attended, great opportunity to meet some people. Last thing I want to discuss is, Mr. Mayor, I drove through Misty Woods last night, and I noticed that there were a whole band of coyotes. I would like to have maybe code compliance meet with the builders, because what they're doing is they're attacking the makeshift trash cans or dump sites that we have out there with the screens around them. All the coyotes were right there in that area feeding off of trash that was left behind by the construction crews. I would think that if we have a concerted effort and have code compliance go out and speak to the builders and say, you got to clean this part up. And I think that's a concerted effort for all the builders, because they're getting free food and they're congregating in that area.
I see Mr. Waite grinning and laughing. I'm betting that means he's already all over this one. Yep.
And thank you guys.
Very good.
And I bet he drives through that neighborhood on his way home tonight.
All right, Mr. Davis?
Nothing, sir.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Nothing, sir.
Mr. Larson?
Nothing.
Mr. Thompson?
Nothing.
Dr. Kaiser?
Nothing.
Mr. Crawford?
Nothing.
I do want to comment that our local Masonic Lodge had a car show over the weekend, and a couple weeks ago the Friends for Fisher House had a car show, and in addition to the Adobo Festival that I attended and the Filipino Festival that was in Pickerel Park and a number of other things, it's a vibrant community, lots of interaction and the putting on of fun things for people to do, and not put on by the city but put on by other entities with the big turnouts for each one. So all that said, if there's nothing else from council or staff, then we stand adjourned. Yes, Main Street Committee members, see Mr. James.